The Elemental Wizard of Hogwarts Chapter 61-80. Chapter 61 Grindelwald's Revenge. Seal asked Fawkes to send him back the next morning. Standing at the gate of the castle, looking at the stone tablet as clean as new, for more interesting things, that had been changed by Seal had been completely cut off. The text changed back to, for the greater good. Sha'ur's brows jumped when he saw it, and he complained silently in his heart that the old man was really careful. As for the fire, even the stone tablet was completely flattened. Helpless, Charles still pushed open the door and went straight to the top with the German pork knuckle and sauerkraut he bought yesterday. This time, he didn't encounter any obstacles like last time, and he easily climbed to the top. As soon as I entered the door, I saw Grindelwald sitting there with a stinky face and staring at Seal, who had just entered the door. Seal has already been in his 30s in his 2 lifetimes. I took out the food I brought yesterday. Come on, you're welcome. I remember Mr. Grindelwald, you are German. Although you haven't been to Germany, this is the most authentic German restaurant you've found. Come and try it. Charles continued to please Grindelwald, who was in the sulking stage with a grin. Facts have proved that the theory of reaching out and not hitting the smiling face still works well in the evil capitalist society. Grindelwald watched Seal open the food box angrily. Although it was a little cold, Grindelwald didn't have any trouble because of the kid's grin and the gift he brought to himself. With a wave of his hand, a flame appeared to reheat the food, ignoring the rainbow fart next to Seal, and ate slowly and gracefully. While eating, he began to complain about the unauthentic and bad cooking of this dish. It made Seal stand on the side and was embarrassed to death. He didn't laugh, nor did he laugh. After all, he skinned himself first, and the key was to be discovered. It was difficult for Seal to deny the rich traces of earth elements. With a cold snort, Grindelwald slowly put down the tableware in his hand. Although he complained that it was not authentic and not delicious, he still ate it all. Seeing Seal standing awkwardly by the side, Grindelwald finally opened his mouth. What? Look down on my creed. For the greater good. Seal was startled, thinking that looking at this, the old man was really a little angry. So Seal hurriedly respected and replied with the seriousness of a good student. I don't have any thoughts of looking down on your creed, it's just a simple prank. Grindelwald snorted coldly, turned his head and walked back to the window. Neither me or Dumbledore, this idea has always been implemented in our whole life, even if it seems a bit outdated now, but for the stone tablet, countless people died, their souls scattered, not even a body was left. Grindelwald was a little sad, and seemed to recall something. Seal also felt a little emotional, and also understood that he really did not have a place for the skin this time, so he sincerely apologized. I'm sorry, Mr. Grindelwald, let's not say whether your idea is correct, but it is undoubtedly great. I ask myself that I can't sacrifice everything for the greater good, so I sincerely apologize. I hope you forgive me. Grindelwald saw Seal's sincere remorse, and he couldn't say anything. He sighed and said sharply, What are you still doing there? Pack up and prepare for today's training. Seal also breathed a sigh of relief. Although he had been imprisoned for decades, he was the first generation of the Dark Lord after all. With that momentum, Seal, who had been a civilian in 2 generations, was still a little bit unbearable, and cleaned up quickly. Suddenly, Seal went to the training ground with Grindelwald as he did a month ago. Charles, I'm going to start attacking with all my strength from now on. Don't worry, I'll make sure your life is safe. Get ready, let's start. Seal hurriedly stopped. Wait, teacher, I can't beat you with ordinary black magic. Damn it, just now, are you going to burn me to death? I'm going, old man, I suspect you're taking revenge on me. Stop fighting, I admit defeat, I was wrong. 10 minutes later, Seal completed the fattening project, and it seemed that he had gained a whole circle of weight. Seal lying on the ground couldn't even move a finger, and even breathing was accompanied by severe pain. Damn old man, you are definitely taking revenge on me. Seal cried with tears in his eyes. Grindelwald walked slowly to Seal with his hands behind his back. I still have the strength to speak. It seems that I beat him lightly. After that, he waved his wand and continued. This frightened Seal, and his strong desire to survive made Seal immediately apologize. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please forgive me, teacher. There is no next time. Grindelwald was amused, and with the wave of his wand, Seal closed his eyes to prepare for the storm. It's been a long time without any feeling. Carefully opened his eyes and saw that Grindelwald had already gone far, with 2 bottles of potion beside him. Grindelwald's voice came from a distance. Hurry up and take the medicine, we will continue in the afternoon. For the next month, if you can't make progress, wait for it to become like this every day. The tension that Seal had just relieved was stimulated by this sentence again, and he got up and grabbed the potion and returned to his box to put the medicine on himself. This dead old man is definitely taking revenge on me. Seal hid in the box and complained while applying medicine. Having said that, there is one thing to say. 1 bottle of Grindelwald's potion is taken orally and 1 bottle is applied externally. It was really good. In less than 10 minutes, the swollen Seal returned to his original handsome but creamy appearance. Thinking of being beaten up in the afternoon, Seal was both angry and helpless. Take out your own small notebook and start writing and drawing. This is a habit of Seal. After each battle, you must summarize your mistakes and don't make them again next time. You bastard, get out and eat. Just as Seal was writing seriously, Grindelwald's voice came from the mouth of the box, and Seal had to put down his pen and walked out in shock. Seeing a table of German dishes on the table, Shire's shock was even more intense. You did this? Charles asked in disbelief. Get out if you don't like it. Grindelwald cursed back angrily. How can it be? The teacher's cooking must be delicious. Shire sat down shamelessly and began to eat, not to mention the taste is really good. Seeing where Seal was swirling, Grindelwald helplessly shook his head, suddenly remembered something, and a wicked smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Charles, give you a chance, I don't need you to beat me. In the next training, if you can hit me, even if it is, I will give you a copy of the memory after Paris was burned. Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal raised his head in shock, and the sauerkraut at the corner of his mouth was drooping and he didn't notice it outside. Sure enough, this kid doesn't look very smart occasionally, and his IQ is high and low. Seeing Seal's appearance, Grindelwald reluctantly covered his face and muttered silently. Chapter 62-Grindelwald's Test. Grindelwald's training was really effective. He was beaten day after day, and Seal's progress was visible to the naked eye. From the beginning, he had no power to fight back, and now he has been fighting back and forth. Not only is Seal feeling that he has improved rapidly, even Grindelwald began to think about grabbing apprentices with Loudang. But it may be the first time he was beaten too hard. Seal developed a very bad habit. He always likes to talk nonsense when fighting. The Buddha was born and the 2 Buddhas were born in heaven, and every day he beat Shire to a large circle to relieve his anger. But in the days that followed, Grindelwald gradually became accustomed to Seal's rude words, and even the old man began to reply, and the reply became more and more sharp, and sometimes Seal couldn't resist. Seal ended his training once and discussed this issue with Grindelwald, who knows that the old man is very arrogant. He glanced at Seal in disdain, and replied calmly, the enemies I have fought against are better than you. There are too many. What kind of bullshit have you not heard? Just you. So tender. This made Seal look dazed, and even began to wonder if this Grindelwald was the one who drank the compound decoction. Without seeing him drink the compound decoction, Seal almost had to call Fawkes to run first as a respect. As the first-generation Dark Lord, Grindelwald had countless enemies, and of course he had plenty of battle experience. According to him, if Seal stayed here until a month after the school started, he would definitely be able to tune the arrogant who had just graduated from Seal. Luo is no match. Seal had been secretly proud of it for a long time. Of course, with a spellmaster in front of him, it is naturally impossible for Seal to learn elemental magic. In his spare time, he also pesters Grindelwald to learn the knowledge taught by normal schools. Grindelwald is not stingy. As long as Seal asks, he will just teach. In just 1 month, Ciel's progress has been advancing by leaps and bounds. Relying on the knowledge learned from Grindelwald and the blessing of 2 major elements, Ciel finally successfully touched Grindelwald when the school was about to start. Son. It was really just a touch, and the earth element puppet punched the old man. Except that the old man's defense was fluctuated a few times, it did not cause any damage. However, under the various unreasonable troubles of Shah-Ur, the old man still agreed to Shah-Ur's touch. Come to him. It can be said that he is very used to the student Ciel who fell from the sky. After all, Grindelwald has been imprisoning himself for a long time, and he knows that his time is running out. In the long years, he also wants to leave his inheritance and bring knowledge to the grave. In Grindelwald's opinion, it is absolutely incompatible for the sake of more great interest practice. Time flies, and soon it will be the day when Hogwarts starts, and tomorrow will be the day when the two will part. After finishing today's training, Ciel is also a little sad. After all, they have lived together for almost a month. Whether it is the Dark Lord or not, Grindelwald has indeed taught Ciel a lot of knowledge and experience. Seeing the old man standing in front of the window with his hands behind his back and watching the sunset outside the window, Ciel also had a hint of emotion in his heart. Charles, you say, did I really do something wrong? Suddenly Grindelwald asked Charles a question. Ciel was a little surprised by Grindelwald's question, and after thinking about it carefully, Ciel smiled, very gently. No, I don't think you did anything wrong. The power of ordinary people is getting stronger and stronger. It's not wrong for you to make such a choice when you see a certain future. Ciel replied affirmatively. Unfortunately, I still failed. I was imprisoned on this tower voluntarily, in exchange for the second half of my saints' lives. Dumbledore also supported me from the beginning, and gradually began to oppose me. Quote. Grindelwald's tone was full of vicissitudes, and he continued with a sigh. But I have to admit that Dumbledore is a very good paper painter. After my failure, he very well covered the holes I made with fake paper. Although it is not so strong, it can be used by the wizard. We still have some room to live. Quote. Ciel smiled softly and didn't answer. The wizards of that era were undeniably powerful and ideal, but the development of the world would not stop him from advancing because of the appearance of a few people. Many movies in the past life have shown this. The most classic is The Mutants, how similar Grindelwald and Magneto are, but there is no doubt that they all failed in the end. I once thought that the wizards were hopeless and could only wait to be slowly eaten away by muggles, but until you appeared, your theory broke my inherent cognition and even gave me a bright spot. Feeling. Grindelwald turned to look at Ciel, his tone a little frantic. Join me, Ciel, to complete the world you said. Wizards are hidden among muggles, and they can even slowly control muggles from the inside. Ciel looked at Grindelwald with a black question mark on his face. Did I say that? Why can't I remember? God is pitiful. I just put forward a simple idea at the beginning. My dream is to return to the muggle world, buy the shares in my hand a few years later, and feel at ease as my financial freedom. Old salted fish is fine. Excuse my refusal, Mr. Grindelwald. I am grateful for the knowledge you have given me, but I have never thought of subverting any muggle rule. A wizard is always a wizard, a muggle is always a muggle, the two can intersect, but absolutely impossible to lead. Quote. Ciel answered seriously, speaking very slowly, and even his whole body began to tense. His right hand was always holding his wand, and even his joints began to turn white. After Ciel answered Grindelwald's words, he was waiting for Grindelwald's answer. If he wanted to do something, Ciel would definitely call Fawkes at the fastest speed and ask for Dumbledore's help. When Grindelwald heard Ciel's answer, the frantic expression on his face gradually turned cold, and he stared at Ciel, like a beast that would tear him apart at any time, and spit out a sentence in a cold tone. I'll give you one more chance, Charles Lancaster. I'm sorry, I refuse. As soon as Grindelwald asked, Ciel answered directly, without any hesitation, and was ready to attack at any time. Ciel's back was wet with cold sweat at this time. The momentum of one of the most powerful magicians in the contemporary era is not something that ordinary people can resist. Seal gritted his teeth and insisted on answering Grindelwald. Hearing Seal's answer, Grindelwald didn't act immediately, and still stared at Seal coldly, as if standing in front of him were not a living thing but a lifeless piece of meat. Suddenly, Grindelwald laughed, and the icy atmosphere disappeared in an instant. Grindelwald was very happy and stepped forward and patted Seal on the shoulder. "Congratulations, you passed the test, Charles, you are my best student, no one." Seal was bewildered by the sudden turn of events, and he could only look at Grindelwald, who was laughing with a black question mark face. Chapter 63 Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Seal's mood was like riding on a roller coaster, from the nervousness just now to the question mark of black people. Looking at Grindelwald's smiling expression, Seal swears, if it is not really beat, Seal will definitely give this piece an old punch was slapped on the face. Grindelwald looked at Seal's expression from a skeptical look on his face to now staring at him fiercely, and a bad taste in his heart gradually sprouted, and an old fist magic hit Seal in the face. Looking at Charles, who was covering his nose with an aggrieved face, Grindelwald's heart was even more happy. "Don't you want to know why I asked you that?" Grindelwald asked happily. "Why?" Seal rubbed his nose, his voice a little dull, and looked at Grindelwald indignantly. "Hey, little guy, if you have time, learn occlumency with Dumbledore, or learn expression management, your thoughts are all on your face. Being beaten is comfortable." Seeing that Seal was holding Shike to kill him and was about to get up and fight with himself, Grindelwald hurriedly continued, "Speaking of business, where did you just say?" Charles sat down again, glanced at the old man in front of him angrily, and reminded, "Why are you asking me that?" "Oh, yes, let me tell you why. Very simple, the current wizarding world can accommodate Voldemort, but there is absolutely no place for another Grindelwald." The old man's expression was serious, looking at Seal, and continued. "You and I are both prophesying mag. I believe you also know what the future will look like. The wizarding world can still accommodate Voldemort, but what about 10 years later? 20 years later? This is not an alarmist, Seal, this is very realistic. You should know how Muggles treat the unknown." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal broke out in white sweat. Seal knew too well that people who are not of our race must have different hearts. Things like racial discrimination are not uncommon in the Muggle world, let alone suddenly appear. The magician. "Listen, Seal, I don't know how carefully you see the future, but your ideas are great, and your teacher and I are very supportive of your ideas. The magic world needs to change too much, so let it go. Go." Grindelwald looked at Seal with a smile, as if he was looking at his grandson who was about to grow up. Seal's ideas and Seal's talents all made Grindelwald very satisfied, even a little jealous. Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal smiled bitterly. "Teacher, do you know what my biggest dream is?" Hearing Seal's words, Grindelwald looked at Seal with some doubts. "Actually, if possible, I really don't want to get involved in the grievances between Voldemort and Harry Potter, and I don't want to participate in any future changes in the magical world. My biggest dream is to master the magic that I should learn, know him, and understand him." And then, Charlton paused and seemed hesitant, but he continued after thinking for a while. Then, holding the Muggle stocks bought by Cow GG, lying in the piles of banknotes, bringing friends and relatives around, and being a salted fish in peace, drinking tea and reading the newspapers all right. As soon as Seal finished speaking, the opposite Grindelwald looked at Seal with an extremely complicated expression on his face. Roughly translated, it was, "I taught an evildoer. A salted fish leads the magic world. Is Dumbledore reliable?" Seeing Grindelwald's expression, Charles was both angry and funny. "Don't think about it, teacher. My dream is indeed a salted fish, but unfortunately I met a little girl named Hermione. In the future, she is an important participant in the future, and there is nothing I can do about it." Quote. Seal spread his hands helplessly and continued. "I may be really salty, but I really don't want any danger to the people I know well. Teacher, I am different from you. I know the boy named Harry Potter and the people around him, the future, everything that happened around me in 6 years. I also know very well the future of that girl named Hermione. It's very dangerous. It can even be said that every step is dancing on the tip of a knife. I have tried to lead the girl to escape her original destiny, but unfortunately I failed." Seal was a little helpless, and then continued. "Then I had some plans. After all, as a friend, I still wanted to help her. I even have to thank Voldemort. His presence really saved me a lot of things." Seal said this and looked at Grindelwald in front of him with a smile. As the first-generation Dark Lord, even though he was still in Nurmengard when Voldemort inherited his Dark Lord's name, he also knew a little about the pure player. The guy with the blood first name. In an instant, Grindelwald understood what Seal was thinking, and silently raised a thumb at Seal. Seal also accepted Grindelwald's admiration with a smile, and was so proud of himself. Grindelwald got up and pretended to pat the dust on his body, and said to Seal, "If you have an idea, then I won't worry about it. If you need any help, you can ask Fawkes to send me a letter. To be honest, I don't mind breaking out." Seal didn't say anything, silently wrote down Grindelwald's words, and bowed deeply with gratitude. Grindelwald also calmly accepted Seal's bow, and then said happily, "Okay, I'll take you out." After finishing speaking, Grindelwald took the initiative to pick up Seal's box and started walking outside the castle with Seal. Seal, who had been together for almost 2 months, was full of reluctance at this time. But the good times have an end. Slowly, the gate of the castle opened. Grindelwald took Seal out of the castle, but a figure that Seal did not expect appeared at the gate of the castle, looking kindly. With Charles. "Dang, Teacher Dumbledore." Charles was extremely surprised at this moment. He didn't expect Dumbledore to be here. Even Grindelwald was surprised, but quickly hid it. "Hello, Seal, long time no see." Dumbledore greeted Seal with a smile. "Teacher, but why are you here like this?" Seal still didn't calm down. Looking at Dumbledore, he still didn't know what to say. "Oh, about this, I'm glad you asked about it. Seal, I want to thank you for the fairy tale you weave for me. I'm really happy," Dumbledore said, and took out Seal from his arms. His handwritten novel, Dumbledore, has been around. Then he put the book back in his arms, as if it was some kind of treasure, and then said to Seal. "To be honest, Seal, I'm starting to be jealous of myself in the book. He has everything I've lost, but it's undeniable that this book also made me see my cowardice clearly. I'm glad you can point it wake me up." Seal also understood what was going on, and laughed happily. Looking at the silent Grindelwald and the smiling Dumbledore, Seal laughed happily. Then, "Two teachers, you guys say, I'd better avoid it." After speaking, Seal took the box from Grindelwald, then turned around and walked into the castle. As the castle door slammed shut, Dumbledore and Grindelwald were left at the scene. "Long time no see, Grindelwald." Dumbledore spoke first. "Long time no see, I thought you would never see me again in this life," Grindelwald replied. Before Dumbledore could speak, the gate of the castle opened again, and Seal stuck his head out and looked at Dumbledore with a smile. "Excuse me to interrupt, Mr. Dumbledore, may I ask how you got here?" Dumbledore was not angry, and answered Seal happily, "It's still a Muggle plane, and I think we're going back to Seal." "Oh no," Seal shouted in despair, "I'm starting to miss Fawkes." After speaking, the door closed again, leaving only Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Chapter 64-Teacher, Make a Deal. Seal stayed in the castle for a long time, and he didn't know what Dumbledore and Grindelwald were talking about outside. Maybe it was their past friendship or their future imagination. Seal is still looking forward to the reconciliation of these two old people. After all, to be honest, they are so old. Especially since these two old people are his own teachers and people who are concerned by Seal, Seal still hopes that the two of them will reunite. Well, this is also a small regret of watching Harry Potter Shire in the previous life. Grindelwald's appearance of begging for death in order to protect Dumbledore's grave made Charles cry for a long time at that time. The only thing Seal wants to complain about is that the actors at that time were too far from reality. Seal waited until noon, and even prepared lunch. When he was about to ask the two old men to come in and eat something, the gate of the castle was pushed open again, and Grindelwald walked in with a smile on his face. After seeing Grindelwald walk in, Seal asked happily, "Finished? I just wanted to invite you in for some food." Grindelwald seemed to be in a really good mood. Maybe it was the joy of reuniting his old friends, and he didn't care about Seal's ridicule, so he patted Seal on the head angrily. "Little brat, hurry up. Dumbledore said that he will miss the plane later." Grindelwald picked up Shire's suitcase and was about to leave. Charles ran after him, shouting as he ran, "Hey! Wait! My lunch!" Grindelwald didn't look back and kept walking. "Go away, your lunch is mine." Carrying his suitcase, Shire looked at the castle gate which was slammed shut. His heart was meaningless, and he couldn't help but feel sorry for the big steak he had just fried, top-quality beef, which Shire was usually reluctant to eat. Looking back at Dumbledore who was standing behind him smiling, Seal gritted his teeth. "Teacher, you'd better tell me to leave by plane later, otherwise, you will pay me for steak." Dumbledore wasn't angry, but made fun of Charles happily. "Don't think about it, even if you eat it, you'll have to spit it out later, right?" After saying that, he grabbed Seal by the shoulders, and upon seeing this, Seal immediately remembered the shape-shifting 2 months ago, and hurriedly shouted, "Wait, I'm not ready. Wait." Before Seal could finish speaking, he heard a pop, and once again Seal felt like he was being forced into a rubber hose. Hearing that the noise outside disappeared, Grindelwald smiled and shook his head, looking at the exquisite steak meal in front of him. The corners of his mouth rose unconsciously, and muttered to himself happily, "This kid, although a little noisy, I have to admit that he is very good at cooking. Let's go after eating. I really look forward to his expression when he sees me again." After speaking, he sat down gracefully and started cutting the steak. In comparison, Seal was not so comfortable. At this time, Seal was in an unknown alley, holding the trash can and retching all the time. "Teacher, my dear teacher, has this thing been so uncomfortable all the time?" Charles felt like he had vomited out yesterday's overnight meal. Dumbledore was very calm. The old god stood aside, and even had time to perform a transfiguration on his clothes, turning it into a decent suit. Hearing Ciel's question, Dumbledore thought for a long time and answered seriously. "It's been too long, I can't remember it. I seem to have been used to it for a long time at the time. Judging from your appearance, it should take longer to get used to it." Hearing Dumbledore's answer, Charles held the trash can in despair and looked at the bustling crowd outside the alley, and asked his soul firmly, "Teacher, to be honest, we are moving fast when there is nothing else." "Way." Dumbledore was sincere, and answered calmly, "Sometimes, that one is more uncomfortable. Do you want to try it?" Hearing Dumbledore's answer, Seal was stunned for a moment, and then thought of the way described in the original book about hooking under his belly button and spinning around. Seal got goosebumps at his own thoughts. Looking at where Dumbledore was looking at him, those eyes clearly said, "What do you want to do?" Charles pondered for a while, and felt that he had almost recovered. He let go of the trash can, turned to look at Dumbledore who was standing by the side, and asked a serious question, "Teacher, shall we make a deal?" Dumbledore never thought that Seal would ask such a question, and answered with great interest. "Oh, what deal? Let's hear it." Seal looked at the crowd outside, as if he had made up his mind. Looking at Dumbledore, he asked with difficulty, "Teacher, how much can you buy your fox for me?" Hearing Ciel's question, Dumbledore was stunned. At this time, Dumbledore had never been bombarded by the current internet. Otherwise, Dumbledore would definitely answer Ciel directly. "How could this word come from your mouth? Say it. You are so young, how could you say such a thing?" He snorted angrily, turned around and took Ciel to the airport to check in. Ciel didn't care. Looking at Dumbledore who was far away, he chased after him with a smile, and then bombed. Anyway, after spending so long in Grindelwald, Ciel couldn't change it. "Hey, teacher, don't go, it's really not good, you can just tell me where I can catch it." Hey, teacher, don't go so fast, if Fox has a cub, can you keep it for me? Hey, teacher, no, don't do it. Be careful, I'll sue you for not caring about children. I was wrong. Stop chasing. Teacher, you have to pay attention to your image. Hey, you don't hit someone with the head. I'll pull your beard. In the end, Seal still honestly cut off the idea of taking a phoenix to travel. This battle between young and old ended in Dumbledore's unscathed crushing of Seal. Of course, Seal couldn't really fight with the old man. It's more like a joke between grandfather and grandson. Didn't you see the Muggle police at the airport, or the two people who were frantic beside them, shaking their heads with a smile on their faces and turning away? After a few hours on the plane, Seal and Dumbledore walked out of the airport together. As soon as they got out of the airport, they saw that the Hermione family and his parents came to greet him. Charles happily rushed forward and gave his parents a big hug, and then a big hug to Hermione. Even the Grangers didn't let go. Shaw felt very happy. He learned knowledge this summer, met a strong thigh, and lived happily at the same time. He didn't notice that after he hugged the little girl's flushed face collided with the faces of both parents. Expression. Chapter 65-The Burrow. After Dumbledore rejected the idea of the two families having lunch together, he took out a note from his arms and said that this was the magic that Charles needed to master next semester. Charles nodded and took it with both hands. A solemn bow thank you. Of course, what was even more exciting was the little girl next to her whose eyes were about to turn into stars. Dumbledore obviously noticed the little girl's desire but was embarrassed to grab it. He happily said to Hermione that we could study it together. After listening to Dumbledore's words, Hermione was about to jump for joy. As a scholar, what do you want most? Obviously, the knowledge that has not been learned and the notes of the boss. Dumbledore's own heart in Seal's hands is obviously eligible. After declining the invitation of the two families to have dinner together, Dumbledore hurriedly disappeared into an empty corner, and Charles kept watching Dumbledore disappear into the crowd. Seeing Dumbledore leave, Seal looked at Hermione and said without reason, "Hermione, don't you think it's a little weird for the teacher's beard to match the suit?" Hermione looked at Seal with a bit of confusion, saying that there was nothing weird about it except that the beard was too long. Seal clapped his hands happily. "That's right, the beard is too long. The teacher should still wear a robe, a large staff in the left hand, a one-handed sword in the right, and the magic spell is lighting, and the other skills are the one-handed sword and the charge block or something." Before Seal could finish speaking, he received a shudder from his own mother on the head. Seal covered his head and looked at his violent mother with some grievance, as if she was saying, "What are you beating me for?" Mrs. Williams said calmly, "First of all, Shire should respect the teacher, and secondly, she has seen the Lord of the Rings. Dumbledore is not Gandalf, although both of them have long beards." Seal was completely stupid, grabbed his mother and kept asking about the Lord of the Rings, and the helpless mother finally told Seal that this was a new novel published recently, because his child was a magician, so Mr. William Bodditt came back. Hermione helplessly looked at the foolish Seal from behind, silently calculating in her mind when school would start, and then she could continue to use magic. Damn secrecy. After scolding in a low voice, the trot followed the large army. After the two families had a grand dinner together, they went back to their respective houses, and Charles, who was lying in his little bed, suddenly remembered that he forgot to remember Grindelwald. At this time, Seal had the heart to cry, and he had been looking forward to God 3 for a long time. Seal decided to ask Fox to send a letter after school started to see if he could make it up. If it doesn't work, please ask Old Dang to ask Newt. I believe that Newt's protagonist perspective is definitely better than Grindelwald's villain's perspective. The dazed Seal fell asleep, and early the next morning, Hermione ran from her house to Seal's house, and grabbed Seal, who was still in bed. Before Seal was awake, the little girl started complaining about Harry's summer vacation like a barrage of guns. Seal listened for a long time to understand that this was a letter from Ron to Hermione, explaining that Harry, and said that Harry had been rescued safely last night. Looking at the little girl who was sulking beside him, Seal was a little amused. When he was about to get up to wash up, Hedwig flapped his wings and flew over outside the window. Hermione recognized Hedwig immediately. "It's Harry's owl." After saying that, she ran over to open the window and carried Hedwig into the room. After taking the letter in Hedwig's mouth and starting to read it, Seal also fed Hedwig a few dried small fish. When Shire returned to the house after washing up, Hermione just finished reading the letter and said to Shire, "It's Ron. He invited us to play at his house for a week, and then go straight to the Diagonal to buy things together." After thinking about it, Seal agreed to the proposal. After the two went to their parents to ask for permission, Hermione wrote a reply letter to Hedwig. It didn't take long for Hedwig to bring a reply, which stated that the Weasleys would pick them up before lunch and then return to the Burrow for lunch together. The two quickly packed their belongings and waited for the arrival of the Weasleys. Seal also tidied up his fireplace. Although he was not connected to the Flow network, in case the Weasleys applied for a temporary exit, it would be interesting to see the fireplace still burning in the future. When it was almost 10 o'clock, the doorbell of Shire's house rang, and the two people who were doing nothing looked at each other, and then Hermione jumped up and opened the door. It was Mr. Weasley standing outside the door. "Well, hello, I think you're Hermione. I'm Ron's father, Arthur Weasley. Oh, you must be Seal." The red-haired man smiled and greeted Seal. Greeted by Hermione. Although the clothes were slightly shabby, the kindness on the man's face increased a lot, and Charles hurriedly stood up and greeted Mr. Weasley. Later, when Mr. Weasley was curiously looking at everything in Shire's house, the two little ones quickly packed themselves up. Shire put all Hermione's luggage into his small suitcase, and the two of them went into battle lightly, ready to go. Set off. Mr. Weasley looked at Seal's suitcase with some envy, and said to Seal, "It's a very nice suitcase. Someone once had one. Tiana, that suitcase has caused us countless troubles." Charles laughed and replied calmly to Mr. Weasley, "Thank you, sir, I got it from the teacher. By the way, this is Mr. Newt's box." Hearing the first half of Shire's sentence, Mr. Weasley had such a strange expression on his face, and the second half of the sentence made Mr. Weasley's face change greatly, as if he was afraid of some strange magical creature rushing out of the box. Seal hurriedly explained that there were no magical creatures in it, just simple household items and luggage, which made Mr. Weasley breathe a sigh of relief. Otherwise he really didn't know whether to bring Seal home or take Seal go directly to the Ministry of Magic for the record. At first, Charles was still thinking about how to get to Ron's house. The known ways of traveling for wizards seemed to have some shortcomings. Before Charles could finish thinking about it, Mr. Weasley walked to the side of the road and stretched out his wand. A crackling sound. A three-decker bus stopped at the gate of Shire's house. The door opened, and a thin young man stuck his head out. "Oh, it's been a long time, Mr. Weasley. Are you going to take the bus?" Mr. Weasley was obviously a little embarrassed. After dealing with it hastily, he brought the two of them into the car and sat down. After paying the fare, Charles hurriedly found a seat, fastened his seat belt, and even tightened his grip. "Grab the anchors around you." Hermione looked at Seal with some doubts. Of course, when the car started, she instantly regretted not learning from Seal. In a statement from the flight attendant, after the next stop at the Burrow, the three-story bus rushed out like a bullet leaving a gun, completely ignoring the principles of physics and disappearing at the end of the road to the Shire house. Chapter 66-Secrets of the Magical World. In a violent braking sound, the three-story bus stopped in front of a crooked building that the architects of the Muggle world would call unscientific. Hermione and Seal got out of the car with pale faces, and even Mr. Weasley was a little pale. Seal tried to restrain himself from retching while leaning against the fence of the Burrow. Hermione even vomited while leaning against the fence. Land. Mr. Weasley stepped forward and waved his wand to clean up Hermione's vomit, and invited the two of them into the room to rest for a while with a pale face. Seal and Hermione walked into the house, helping each other. Seal looked at Hermione's pale face, endured his constant nausea, and whispered to Hermione, "I must study a way of moving that has no side effects. It's too painful." Hermione nodded weakly in agreement, and then said to Seal, maybe it will be better to try Flow Network and Shapeshift next time. The corner of Ciel's mouth twitched, and he replied helplessly, I believe me, that's harder. After Hermione listened, she looked at Ciel with the eyes that I agree with you for setting off a revolution in wizard travel, and Ciel also looked at Hermione with an expression of mutual encouragement. The two of them were halfway there, and the strange building door opened, and Ron came out of the house, ignoring the pale faces of the three, and said happily to Charles and Hermione, welcome to the Burrow. Then he enthusiastically helped Ciel to carry the suitcase. Harry came out of the room immediately, looked at the pale three people, and asked a question carefully. After Charles waved his hand to indicate that it was all right, Harry quickly stepped forward to help Mr. Weasley into the room. After the three entered the room, they directly sat on the chair beside the table and breathed a sigh of relief. Mr. Weasley patted his chest in fear and complained, seriously, I don't want to ride that damn bus anymore. Mrs. Weasley rushed out of the kitchen as soon as she finished speaking. Looking at the three pale faces, she stepped forward and hugged Hermione and Charles tenderly. After a brief self-introduction, she ignored them. Mr. Weasley's open hands went straight into the kitchen. Ron looked at his embarrassed father, and whispered to Shire and Hermione that his mother was about to explode with anger when she discovered the Muggle car that father had secretly modified yesterday. Charles looked at Ron speechlessly, thinking that Mr. Weasley wouldn't have suffered so much if your brothers hadn't sneaked out to pick up Harry. It took a long time for the three of them to recover. Mr. Weasley hurriedly got up and went to the kitchen to help please the angry Mrs. Weasley. Ciel looked helplessly at where the three little ones were chatting and talking non-stop. Suddenly a pair of big hands covered Ciel's eyes. Guess who I am? The twin voices came from behind Ciel. Come on, Fred, this trick is too low level. Ciel complained helplessly, not even changing his posture. Hey, I guessed wrong, George did it just now. The twins crossed the table and stood directly opposite Ciel, a little proud of their traditional prank. Ciel rolled his eyes, complained directly, and ruthlessly pointed at the two of them. Come on, it was Fred just now, I will never make a mistake. The twins looked at Shire, who was in the state of salted fish, in surprise, and asked in unison, Hey, how did you know? We have never made a mistake. Ciel explained helplessly, everyone's element affinity and magic power are different. Fred and George look the same, but the magic power seems to be 1,000 miles away. Hearing Ciel's words, the twins and the three little ones looked at Ciel in surprise. They didn't know any magic or elements. Is this what you learned during the vacation? Ron asked a little sourly, expressing everyone's feelings. That's right, the most important lesson in the holidays is getting beaten up. The more you get beaten up, the more it will come naturally. Ciel said the most pretentious words in the plainest tone. However, the eyes of the 5 people on the other side looking at Ciel gradually changed from envy, jealousy and hatred to the poor boy, which proved that Ciel's pretending might not be so successful, and the atmosphere fell into a secretly awkward situation. In the end, George broke the embarrassment and asked with more interest, Hey, where did you go and what did you learn? I can't even write you an owl on vacation. Ciel glanced at the appearance of the curious 5-member group on the opposite side, knowing that he could not escape today, so he simply answered the question just now, in short, to break the curiosity of a few people. It's nothing, my teacher Dumbledore found someone to train me and teach me some experience. As for who, I promise the teacher can't say, so don't ask me, you can ask my teacher. When everyone heard Ciel's words, they rolled their eyes and asked Dumbledore. Stop joking, it would be hell if you asked. The reason the owl couldn't be delivered is because that place belongs to a small secret realm, similar to the protection of the Crimson Loyalty Charm, so it's normal, but Fawkes can come and go at will. Ciel continued. Several people looked at each other and became more interested in what Ciel learned during the vacation. All they were doing was Gryffindor, and Ciel's experience sounded like a great adventure. Quick, show us. What exactly did you learn? The twins jumped to Ciel's side impatiently, waiting for Ciel to cast the spell. But before Ciel could move, Hermione began to warn a few people. Hey, Did you forget that we can't cast spells during the holidays? Harry has been warned. Hermione looked a little aggressive and taught the twins. Seal waved his hand to signal Hermione not to get excited. He took out his wand and pointed to the ground. The ground slowly swelled up, and gradually more and more soil on the ground gradually formed a puppet made of soil. Hermione was extremely nervous after seeing Seal's actions, and even looked at Seal angrily. Charles, you will be warned. Twice you will be expelled. Seal said goodbye indifferently, and looked at the angry Hermione a little funny, and then smiled and motioned everyone to come closer. The 5 people approached Seal driven by curiosity, and Seal said with a sinister smile. Tell you a secret, there are loopholes in the secrecy law. Haven't you discovered that, as long as you are a child of a wizard family, if you secretly cast spells by yourself, the Ministry of Magic will not be able to find out who is using magic, so it can only be an adult wizard by default. So, no warnings. What? *5 The reactions of several people were quite the same. George, Fred and the 2 rushed to the kitchen to find their father and asked if it was true. The trio were speechless by the news. After a long time, Harry asked cautiously, so, that house elf's magic is counted on me? Bingo, you're right. In fact, the Ministry of Magic's brown wire detection is not accurate. Harry is the best example. Charles snapped his fingers and said with a smug look on his face. It's not fair. Hermione was furious. Malfoy Ron can use magic, but we can't. Hermione flushed with anger. Seal shrugged helplessly and comforted Hermione. No way, this is the rule. Fuck her mother's rules. Hermione still couldn't help but utter a foul language, and Seal hurried up to comfort him. When Hermione was almost healed, Seal returned to his position. At this time, Harry and Ron still didn't react and were still standing there dumbfounded. Seal shook his head helplessly, and said quietly to the trio, do you know? I suspect that my wand may not have a trace. Hermione, you should know the situation. I didn't see Ollivander giving it to me. Wand and trace. Seal continued to calmly throw out the second message. Seeing Hermione thinking, Seal smiled smugly. At this time, Ollivander sneezed fiercely. I seem to have forgotten something. It's been almost a year. What is it? Why can't I remember it? Chapter 67 _ The Life of the Weasleys. So I can use magic at home. Ron reflected for a long time before he asked Harry dumbly, ignoring that the man and woman on the opposite side had already reached the topic of Xingxi. Probably, should, maybe yes. Hasn't your brother gone to see your father? Harry was also a little sluggish. The news was too shocking, and it was difficult to react for a while. In the kitchen, Mrs. Weasley rubbed her brows and looked at the twins hugging and cheering. Arthur, you shouldn't tell them this. My God, I can't imagine what my days will be like. Mr. Weasley also paralyzed his hands helplessly and said, no way, they already know. It seems that one of their friends has a smart little guy. After cheering for a while, the twins immediately ran in front of Seal, hugged Seal from left to right, and took a sip on Seal's face. Before Seal could react, they rushed upstairs. In his own room, he left a sentence, Charles, you really are lucky star. Seal wiped the saliva from his face helplessly and looked at Ron. It's been so long, didn't they find out? Ron was also embarrassed. No, they've been playing around with some alchemy gadgets at home. You know, all kinds of pranks. As soon as Ron's voice fell, there was a roar from upstairs. I said, can you guys be quiet? I need to learn. This made Ron flush even more. You know, Percy, I think we'd better be quiet. Ron explained, blushing, though it didn't help. At this time, Mrs. Weasley came out of the kitchen, glanced at Shire's golem, was slightly shocked, and then returned to her normal expression, and said to the 4 people. Oh, Hermione, you can stay in Ginny's room and ask Ron to lead the way. Mrs. Weasley's tone was very kind, but then changed. Ron, take Hermione to the room quickly. And deal with the goblins. Damn creatures. It was back last night. Throw me away this time. Then he went back to the kitchen in a hurry, looking at Ron's blushing like a monkey's butt. After a long time without saying a complete sentence, Charles went up and patted Ron's shoulders. An expression like "I'm a visitor, it's all the same, all the same." Then he motioned Ron to take Hermione to the room. He and Harry went out to the garden to have a look first. Ron awkwardly showed Hermione a way, and then ran away. Seal also handed his box directly to Hermione, and then beckoned Harry to take a look at the garden. Ciel's golem followed closely behind the two of them. Seeing the boys disappearing from her field of vision, Hermione sighed helplessly, "Boy." Then she started to walk upstairs with the suitcase in her hand. Thinking of Ciel's theory, Hermione was still very excited. At least she could practice spells ahead of time, and Dumbledore's notes. This made Hermione very happy. The words were divided, and when Ciel and Harry came to the garden, they saw that Ron was already holding the goblin in a bitter hatred. The master of rectification, Ciel, immediately put the golem on top. Looking at the two dilapidated stools in the open space, Ciel went up with a transfiguration technique, turning the stools into the Iron Throne. Then he walked to the front, sat down like a king on the throne, and said to Harry, "Ron, my subjects, let my knights help you defend against foreign enemies, you only need to serve me around." Harry and Ron looked at each other and both understood each other's minds. They glanced at the golem silently again, only to see that the goblin was strong and flung the goblin far away, at least better than Ron himself. Much farther. The two quickly reached a consensus, slowly approaching Ciel with low eyebrows and pleasing eyes, and then while Ciel didn't respond, the two rushed up at the same time, beat him. The noise gradually became louder. At this time, the upstairs window was opened again, and Percy's head stuck out. He glanced at the golem at work and the three noisy people. He tilted his head in confusion, and then he didn't, saying something and closing the window again. At lunch, Charles finally met Ron's youngest sister Ginny. The little girl is quite different from the actors in the movie. I have to say that although Ron looks very similar to Rupert, Ginny is surprisingly good-looking. Is looking at Harry's blushing bow from time to time. Ron whispered to Ciel's ear and explained, "Don't stare at Ginny, she's Harry's little fangirl." Obviously Ron's voice was still loud, and Ginny obviously heard Ron's words. His face turned even redder, and then he kicked Ron under the table secretly, still maintaining the look of an elegant lady. Charles looked at Ron rubbing his legs awkwardly, a little funny, but he didn't get any better, and kept refusing Mrs. Weasley's behavior of adding food to him. Although Mrs. Weasley's craftsmanship was excellent, I can't bear to keep eating like this. Ciel and Harry both succumbed to the glory. The next few days were still normal, but finally magic started. Hermione took Ciel and the two began to study the contents of Dumbledore's notes. Ron and Harry played Quidditch from time to time, and occasionally went out. After playing for a while, the twins are always mysterious in their room and don't know what to do. Of course, from time to time, Shire and Hermione secretly learn a few tricks of life magic on the grounds of helping Mrs. Weasley with housework. I have to say, Mrs. Weasley still has 2 brushes, and a family of 9 can be taken care of by her. It must be a little trick, and Hermione and Ciel have benefited a lot. Of course, the only thing that made Shire a little uncomfortable was that under Mrs. Weasley's Amway, Hermione successfully fell in love with Lockhart's Liar's novel. This made Ciel very unhappy, and even wanted to write a letter to ask the old head dang what he thought. He was able to find such a liar. Of course, the only thing that made Ciel more gratified was that under his intervention, Hermione did not have the original book. So infatuated with it. But Hermione's daily routine is still studying, reading novels, studying, and reading novels. The only difference is that she never reads novels in front of Ciel, and it's not that she doesn't say it or she doesn't. On the other hand, Mrs. Weasley really liked Ciel. That one-handed earth element golem can do a lot of things, but also cooks delicious dishes with exotic flavors. Mrs. Weasley began to sigh why Ciel was not her own child. She was even willing to trade Ron for it. Of course, Ron was not so happy. After all, as the person being replaced, Ciel could only smile awkwardly at him, so the family strangely formed several small groups. First of all, Percy is alone. He often does not know what he is doing in his room. The only time we meet is to study. Some of the questions, although Percy has not graduated yet, can still answer some questions. Then there was the magic contact team of Hermione and Seal. The two often went in and out of Seal's small box and practiced magic constantly. It was rare to be able to cast magic at will. Seal and Hermione were very happy. It was that no matter how Seal led, Hermione couldn't sense the elements, which frustrated both of them. Hermione also formed a Lockhart book club with Ginny and Mrs. Weasley. Of course, it was behind Seal's back. Several people could see that Seal hated Lockhart very much, and he was very tacit. Mention it in front of you. Of course, Seal couldn't be so honest, and it didn't take long for him to sneak into the Gemini's troublemaker laboratory. The three of them often gathered together and chatted, and then the eyes of Ron and Harry became not so good. Of course, Ron and Harry, and Mr. Weasley also formed a Muggle research and play team. Harry helped Mr. Weasley to introduce some Muggle things from time to time, and Mr. Weasley didn't mind if it was all right. When I was there, I took Harry and his son to play with. Chapter 68-Charles's Exhortation. Seal stayed in Ron's room for one day and then moved to the twins' room, which caused Ron's strong dissatisfaction, shouting that he was not allowed to enter as his own younger brother, but let Seal in. Seal patted Ron's shoulder helplessly and didn't say a word. He walked into the room like this, but the twins hugged Ron and shouted loudly that Seal was their king, and then gave Ron a lot of candy and left. In fact, I don't blame Shahar. As a man who has read the original book, he simply told the two of them his ideas after the twins, and added some of his own ideas, so he was regarded as a confidant by the twins, and was crowned in the mischievous group King of Ideas. And because Seal was in the room, Mrs. Weasley's inspection of the twins' room was reduced by several orders of magnitude, which made the twins shout that Seal was the mascot of the two. Time passed quickly, and there were only 3 days left before school. Mr. Weasley was going to lead his family to Diagon Alley to buy things for the new semester today. Everyone was very excited, except for Seal. If you want to ask the reason, of course, it is the long list of Lockhart's books on the letter of the new semester. Shire is disgusting to read. The three women in the room are very excited, and even Ginny is very interested. After all Lockhart is also considered the idol of the wizarding world. Seal even began to wonder if the unlucky Lockhart was really that handsome, and about buying books. Seal began to wonder if this guy was running out of money. If you know that the school has 7 books, that's a lot. What about money? It was rare for Harry and Ron to stand on the same line as Seal this time. Although they were not as disgusted as Seal, they were also very fond of this man who Mrs. Weasley always talked about. Nothing fancy. Charles borrowed Harry's owl to explain the situation to the family in advance. The three families agreed to meet at the entrance of the Broken Axe Bar. Mr. Weasley was very happy before leaving. After all, this was a rare opportunity to communicate with Muggles. Weasley Sir is still curious about the products of the Muggle world. Let me see, Ron, Harry, Hermione, Shire, Ginny, George and Fred, Percy. Great. Looks like everyone's here. Who is next? Mrs. Weasley is maintaining order. Of course, how could these children be honest and noisy for a long time before they quieted down and prepared to set off under Mrs. Weasley's scolding? The family plans to use flow powder to go to the Broken Axe Bar, and then from the Broken Axe Bar to Diagon Alley. In order to take care of Hermione, Harry and Charles, 3 people who have never used flow powder, Mr. Weasley explained repeatedly. After that, Gemini and Ron were asked to fight 3 times, for fear of making mistakes. Seal is very brave. The 4th is Seal. After grabbing the flying powder and still in the fireplace, after shouting the Broken Axe Bar, Seal felt a warm flame wrapping around him. Seal thought he would arrive at once like Fox, but a sudden suction appeared, and Seal felt like he was being sucked into the toilet bowl, and he fell out after spinning. Who was lying on the ground could react. He was pulled up by the twins. It's okay, our little Seal, this is the first time, just get used to it. George covered his mouth to comfort Shayu. Seal looked at the two giggling angrily, and after giving himself a cleanup, he was going to find his parents. Although the experience of using it was still a bit weird, I have to say that this thing is indeed more comfortable than apparition. Too much. After Seal picked up the two families who were wandering at the door and couldn't find their way, the others also arrived. Except for Harry, Mrs. Weasley was very flustered. She was fine when she left, but lost one when she arrived. Seal hurried up to comfort him, indicating that Harry might be teleported to other shops in Diagon Alley. Mrs. Weasley then remembered that Harry was calling Diagon Alley, not the axe. Then he hurriedly dragged a few people to the street to find the lost Harry. Everyone was very anxious, except for Seal. Harry should be watching the old peacock hand out black magic items in Bogenbach's shop at this time. Several people shouted Harry's name on the street, and finally found Harry looking a little embarrassed at the intersection of the alley, with a huge Hagrid standing beside him. Looking at Harry, whose glasses were all shattered, Hermione took out her wand and gave him a repair as before, and Seal gave him a refreshment. The parents of Seal and Hermione were both old. Y was relieved and determined that his child had really learned magic. Afterwards, Harry began to tell a few people about his experience. Gemini and Ron expressed curiosity about what happened to Harry, and kept asking about everything in the alley, but this behavior was quickly stopped by Mrs. Weasley. Even Hagrid told everyone earnestly that turning to the alley was not something they could set foot in. After getting rid of the entanglement of a few people, Harry ran to Hermione and Seal, and recounted in detail what happened to the old peacock at the Bogenbach store just now, and thought that Lucius was definitely planning something bad. Seal knew about this, but she didn't point it out. Hermione still expressed her concern for Harry, and seeing Seal's expressionless expression, he pulled Seal, "Help me talk about Harry." Charles glanced at where he was standing, thinking about why Lucius appeared in the alley, and looked at Harry with a cold snort. "Harry, I don't know where you got the courage to hide in an unknown place." "Inside the locker. If I guessed correctly, the name of the locker is the Vanishing Cabinet, and if that locker works successfully, you should be away from Diagon Alley now and don't know where it appeared." As soon as Seal finished speaking, he saw Harry's face suddenly turn extremely pale, and he was extremely frightened. Who would know where a vanishing cabinet that was turned into an alley would lead? Harry wouldn't be surprised if he appeared in a room full of dark wizards. Seeing Harry like this, Seal also sighed helplessly. "Put away your reckless Harry. Being brave doesn't mean being reckless. Even if old Malfoy really wants to do something, the best thing you should do is tell Dumbledore or Mr. Weasley. Study hard. Hermione and I or the teacher won't be with you for the rest of your life." Seeing Harry running to Mr. Weasley's place to report what he had just seen, Charles helplessly sighed and pulled Hermione, who was thinking, "You two, don't always follow that reckless stupid lion. Be reckless together, think more about things, and come to me if you can't solve them, or ask the principal, think more, and stop those two boys who are easy to get on." Quote. Hermione blushed and nodded to indicate that she understood. Seeing Hermione's blushing face, Seal was also a little strange. She was fine just now, but why is her face so red now? He didn't notice that he and Hermione were holding hands with their fingers intertwined. Chapter 69-Angry Char. After that, Seal led Hermione and followed the large group to start strolling in Diagon Alley. The little girl's face became more and more red, but Seal didn't know it at all, that the parents of both sides behind the two little ones were aunts in a car. Laughing, "It means I'm getting it." After a lot of shopping, Seal followed the Weasleys into the Lichen bookstore. At this time, Hermione returned to normal, breaking away from Seal's hand and jumping into the bookstore, along with Wes, Mrs. Lay, and Ginny. Seal frowned slightly. Good guy. He dragged himself back for nearly a week to arrive at Diagon Alley, and Lockhart was still signing the sale here. Shar said that he couldn't understand. Looking at the three women who were eagerly lining up, Shar couldn't say anything. He could only walk up to the second floor of the bookstore by himself, ready to see if there were any books he liked. When going upstairs, Seal glanced at Lockhart, which surprised Seal. This Lockhart is not the actor in the movie, but a real handsome guy in his 30s. In his prime, with big white teeth and a perfect smile, Shire finally understood why Mrs. Weasley was so fascinated by him. Shaking his head, he continued to go up to the second floor. As soon as he came up, he saw Draco standing there watching the lively scene downstairs. A clown who only makes grandstanding, isn't he? Draco said with a look of disdain. Seal looked around in surprise and made sure that there was no one around. Malfoy was talking to himself, and asked suspiciously, "Are you talking to me?" Draco stood up, tidied up his clothes, and looked at Seal with a puzzled expression. "Of course, is there anyone else here?" Afterwards, ignoring Seal's reaction, he continued, "This should be the first time we communicated. In fact, I still don't understand why you would be mixed up with that reckless lion from Potter." Seal smiled wryly. There was what he thought. It was just the situation, and hugging Dumbledore's thigh, there was always a price to pay. "I don't want to either. He's too reckless. Someone needs to stop him. Unfortunately, I'm that person." Draco pouted without answering, turned and continued to look downstairs without speaking. Seal shrugged and decided to ignore Draco and find a book he liked to read. Just as he walked past Draco, he heard a voice, "If you want, we welcome you, including your family and friends." After saying that, Draco walked down the stairs quickly. Seal also looked helplessly at Draco, who was pretending to be somber. I'm afraid even he himself didn't know what he was talking about. Old Malfoy is really, always asking children to do strange things. Shaking his head, he didn't think about anything else, and began to pick out a book on magical creatures written by New York and read it. Seriously, Charles is very interested in creatures like Fox that can move people. After reading it, Seal heard the noise started downstairs. Seal glanced at it, and hurriedly closed the book and ran down. Damn it, I forgot about Weasley and Malfoy. Seal run and rant. Fortunately, by the time Seal ran down to squeeze through the crowd, Hagrid had already separated the two people who were tangled up in a ball. Lucius sneered at Mr. Weasley and mixed the notebook with Ginny's textbook. Stuffed it to Ginny, and Charles saw the whole thing, but didn't say anything. He planned to discuss it with Dumbledore after going to school. The existence of the basilisk must be eliminated, so that Hagrid can clear his suspicions and save this miserable big man. Moreover, the elemental magic book left by the four founders, Charles suspects that it is in Slytherin's secret room, but it is a pity that neither Seal nor Dumbledore can enter. Seal even suspected that the big snake had his own consciousness, otherwise it would be impossible to kill people 3 times, and killed Myrtle alone in almost 1,000 years. Seal wouldn't mind having an extra powerful pet if he could save him. These are all things that need to be discussed with Dumbledore, and I don't know if I told him to prepare more mandrakes last year. Charles was still thinking, when a voice interrupted him. Remember, Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy fought at the signing for Lockhart's book. Lockhart wrinkled over with a smile, and whispered to the Loki who was taking pictures of the Daily Prophet. The dwarf wizard gave an order, which was heard by Seal. Oh, gentlemen, it's not a gentleman's act for me to try to do it in front of so many ladies, is it? Lockhart walked between Mr. Weasley and Lucius with a perfect smile, ready to be an after-the-fact peacemaker. Seal curled his lips in disdain, and Lucius even snorted coldly, watching Mr. Weasley leave a sentence to be optimistic about your children, and then turned around and left with Draco, without giving Lockhart any face. Lockhart didn't mind either. Looking at the bustling crowd, he said happily, "By the way, I have to announce a good news. That is, I will be the teacher of defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts this year." Listening to the cheers around him, Lockhart was very proud, and his smile became more and more perfect. Suddenly, as if he had discovered something, he grabbed Harry, who was watching the fun, and hugged Harry, smile brighter. "Maybe we'll get the headlines, Harry." Harry's expression was not so natural. At this time, he deeply understood why Charles hated this Lockhart so much. Seal gave him a disdainful look and turned to leave. Seal really couldn't bear this peacock who was always showing his feathers for a moment. Before taking a few steps, Charles was pulled by a strong hand. "Wait, oh my God, Dumbledore's apprentice. Come on, take a photo with us. It was Lockhart. At this moment, Charlie's heart swelled with nameless fire. Let go. Charlie's voice was extremely cold. At this time, Lockhart just felt a little hot all over his body, but he didn't pay any attention to what Charles said, and kept urging reporters to take pictures. I said, let it go. Ciel's voice became much louder. Of course, along with the still thin flames that Ciel roared, a red flame instantly enveloped Ciel, making Lockhart hot and shrinking immediately. Pushed back to the side. Ciel was covered in scarlet flames, as if he was a demon returning from hell, and looked at Lockhart fiercely. If you don't want to disappear for no reason, I suggest you stay away from me. Lightning flashed in Ciel's pupils, like a god or a demon, looking at Lockhart. Although Ciel didn't notice it himself, Lockhart at this time was scared out of his wits and nodded tremblingly. Then Ciel turned around and left, and the flame disappeared with Ciel's turn. The crowd automatically gave way to Ciel, the Weasleys, Harry, Hermione, the Williams and the Grangers. Quickly looking at each other, they chased Ciel out. Leaving a group of people at the scene to sit and look to the right, not knowing what to do next. A wealthy-looking man in the crowd glanced at the place where Ciel stood just now. He was unscathed, not even a piece of paper was burning. He raised his brows involuntarily, then turned and left the crowd. Chapter 70 _ The Last Tale of Summer Vacation. Hermione ran for a long time before catching up with Ciel, and the unexpected change made her feel a little overwhelmed. Ciel, are you okay? Hermione looked at Ciel with some worry. I'm fine, it's just that I don't know how to describe it. I feel very irritable. Ciel frowned. He felt that he was indeed a little abnormal, and it seemed that he was going to write a letter to his teacher after returning home. Just as Ciel finished answering Hermione, a large group of Ciel's relatives and friends rushed over, especially Ciel's parents. All of them looked at Ciel with worried eyes, and Mrs. William just wanted to speak. It was interrupted by Charles. I'm sorry, I was a little impulsive just now, and I didn't control my emotions, which caused some trouble for everyone. Ciel bowed and apologized sincerely. After everyone looked at each other, Mr. Weasley stepped forward. Charles, it's okay, we're just worried about you. Are you really okay? Mr. Weasley asked worriedly. As a pure-blood wizard with a long career at the Ministry of Magic, even the poorest of pure-bloods, Mr. Weasley recognized what the flame had just wrapped around the seal. It's all right, Mr. Weasley, thank you for your concern. Ciel looked at Mr. Weasley with some emotion, but Mr. Weasley didn't break the magic of Ciel just now. Mr. Weasley, instead of worrying about me, I think I should worry about Ron. What about the others? Charles looked around and found that the Ron man was gone. Even Harry was here. Ron, it's gone. A group of people became nervous in an instant, and just as they were about to start searching, Ron staggered and rushed out of the corner. Holding a large circle of his own tongue in his hand, he looked so embarrassed. Damn Fred and George, don't wait for me. What kind of candy did you give me? I'm your brother. Ron looked at the twins angrily, as if you didn't explain clearly, I will slap your posture with the tongue in my hand. Looking at Ron's embarrassed appearance, everyone laughed. Even Charles, who frowned, was very happy, but Mrs. Weasley was not so happy. It seemed that he was negligent for a while and let his this bastard has fiddled with something incredible. Mrs. Weasley covered her head with a headache, looking helpless among the group of laughing people. George, Fred, what the hell did you feed Ron? Mrs. Weasley snarled at the twins. Nothing, we made a fat tongue toffee based on Shire's idea. Don't worry, the tongue will go back in 10 minutes. Thanks to our idea king. Thanks for his constant inspiration. After the twins finished speaking one by one, they gave a noble salute to Ciel, who was laughing at the side. Ciel's smile froze on his face all of a sudden. I'll go, don't take me with you. Fred, George, Charles Lancaster, the two mothers, emaciated by their skinny children, roared almost simultaneously. After a while, the three of them covered their heads and followed behind the main group to continue their shopping trip. Seal looked at the twins who were much taller than him with some grievances. "Didn't you say you won't expose me?" Seal leaned closer to the two and whispered. "It's the same when it's difficult." The twins answered in unison, rubbing their heads together. Seal angrily made an international friendly gesture to the two of them, and received double the international friendly gesture. After buying everything, a group of people went back to the Broken Axe bar. Seal and Hermione didn't have many books in their hands this time. After all, there was an accident, and everyone was almost embarrassed to go back to the bookstore. Under the leadership of Seal, apart from Hermione and Ginny, none of the remaining boys bought Lockhart's textbooks. After all, Lockhart was almost scared to pee his pants just now. The way he describes himself in the book is really too bad. At the warm invitation of Mr. Weasley, the three families planned to have a banquet at the Broken Axe. The three dads were very excited at the banquet. Mr. Granger and Mr. William kept asking Mr. Weasley all about magic, and Mr. Weasley was also very excited to ask two new friends about muggles. Especially after Mr. Weasley proudly stated that he had a flying car, the eyes of the two men beside him had green lights. The three of them hooked on their shoulders, like friends they hadn't seen for many years, and they chatted happily. The three mothers shook their heads helplessly, looking at their man's humiliating appearance, and looked at each other. The three of them instantly understood each other's meaning, and they felt that they had also found an organization. Around the topic of their children, the mother also had a lively exchange. In short, the guests and hosts enjoyed the meal. The William and Grangers finally drove home. Shire and Hermione were still in the Weasley family's burrow, and school was about to start. There was no need to toss back and forth. The few days after returning home were uneventful. In the burrow, Shire still had nothing to do with the twins. He practiced magic with Hermione on a daily basis, and even the twins occasionally joined in. With the cover of Mr. Weasley and his wife, a few people have never received any warning letters. But Seal was still very vigilant and told a few people that we should stagger the use to prevent detection. A few people were very dedicated and staggered the use time each time. The only one who suffered was Passy. The future prefect was disturbed every time they practiced magic in two groups in the garden, and even when he opened the window again and scolded him, he was smeared by George's leg-locking spell. In line with the principle of joining if he can't fight, Percy angrily took his wand and went downstairs to teach the arrogant four people a lesson, but unexpectedly found that this exercise can quickly master some skills, especially when fighting. So Percy also joined in, taking on the role of teacher and supervisor, and often instructing a few lower grades of magic. Of course, among these 5 people, Seal is also a half-big devil. With the battle experience that Seal was almost beaten up for a summer vacation, in the case of showing elemental magic, Seal can 1 versus 4, and even can run 4 people out of the way that Seal likes. But once Seal didn't use the elements, the situation was completely reversed. The 4 of them joined forces to make Seal run the way they liked. Although they wouldn't lose, they were still very embarrassed. So much so that after a Char's full effort, several people agreed to prohibit Char from using elements. The only thing in the family is Ginny and Hermione's 2 useless men. Harry is okay, and he knows that he should preview the book when he has nothing to do. After all, he was targeted by Snape in the 1st grade, and he also grew up. Memory. Ron seemed to have given up completely. His daily routine was to eat, sleep, play ball, and even play wizard chess with Harry, who was fine, with no intention of reading at all. Chapter 71 _ Start Train. 2 days passed in a flash. Today is the day when the Hogwarts Express departs. Mrs. Weasley hurriedly prepared everyone's lunch early in the morning, for fear that everyone would not be full. Even Mr. Weasley asked for leave and didn't go to work. After the roll call to make sure everyone was there, the Weasleys were about to set off with a large group of children. The girl was very excited. After all, it was the first time to go to school. This time, in order to prevent Harry's inaccurate pronunciation, the Weasleys decided to drive Mr. Weasley's flying car to King's Cross after discussion. Char stood at the door of the car with his suitcase in hand. There were 10 people including him. He wondered if this little blue car could afford it. Looking at the car that seemed to be underage, Seal patted the top of the car and said in his heart, "You are also bearing a weight that you shouldn't bear at your age," and then bent over and got into the car. Surprisingly, it seems that Mr. Weasley's space expansion spell is good. The inside of the car is unexpectedly spacious and bright, and it is not as crowded as it looks outside. Even 10 people can easily fit in. Mr. Weasley squeezed into the driver's seat, started the car somewhat uncertainly, and then prepared to set off after chanting the driving formula he heard from somewhere. At first, Seal didn't know what Mr. Weasley was whispering. Mr. Sly was talking: accelerator on the right, brake in the middle, clutch on the left, take off invisible, and land smoothly. Seal silently searched for the safety belt and tied it to himself, and then tied it to Hermione, who was chatting with Harry and Ron, making the little girl's face flush red. Of course, after all, he is the maker of this car. Even if he has never driven it, Mr. Weasley is still on the road. Especially when the car takes off, Charles is both scared and excited, and the experience is similar. Airplanes, but much more exciting than airplanes. Looking at the blue sky and white clouds outside, Seal was also a little intoxicated. He opened the car window and reached out to touch it, but Seal didn't touch anything except water vapor and strong wind. Hermione was amused by the childish behavior of Seal, but she didn't say anything. Suddenly the little girl was stunned, and then she grabbed Seal's ear angrily and twisted it a few times. Shatter was also confused. He was fine, so he screwed me. It hurts. Hermione let go. What happened? Charles began to beg for mercy. Damn Charles, didn't you tell me last year that you were afraid of heights? For this reason, I went to explain the situation to Professor McGonagall for you. The little girl's face was flushed with anger. Seal also realized that he simply didn't want to take flying lessons at the beginning. He felt that it was not safe and not cool at all to ride a wooden stick to the sky side by side with the sun. Don't, I was wrong, you listen to my quibble. Charles began to beg for mercy, trying to justify his actions at the time. Noisy 10 people flying in the rainy Tianshan Mountains in the UK. The car was full of laughter and laughter. Arthur and Molly looked at Shire and Hermione with a hint of laughter. It was the same when they were young. Make trouble. Sadly, until the landing, Hermione still had a puffy bun face. Looking at Seal was funny and helpless, although she was so cute that people couldn't help but rue her puffy face, but considering that it was because of his own reasons that Seal gave up this immature idea in his heart. The whole family got off the bus at a certain interval. In order not to attract the attention of Muggles, everyone agreed to go directly to the platform after getting off the bus without stopping. Although Charles felt that it was of little use, he still obeyed Mr. Weasley's instructions. When Charles carried his suitcase through the stone pillars and came to the platform, he looked at the bustling crowd and the steaming train. Even though he had seen it twice, Charles still felt a dreamy feeling. It seems that the anticipation of seeing the Hogwarts Express for the first time is back. Before Seal could reminisce, Hermione chased after him from behind, and began to pull Seal into the car anxiously. There were a lot of people, and she didn't want to sit in a box with someone she didn't know. The two hurried to the car, and after finding an empty box, Hermione stopped talking, apparently still sulking with Seal. Seal shook his head helplessly, then turned into a dog-licking appearance and began to make the little girl happy. As an Englishman in the 1990s, Hermione was no match for someone who had experienced information bombardment in the 21st century. Under the output of an earthy love story, Hermione was defeated after all. Looking at Seal with a blushing face, Hermione was still a little angry. She tried her best to look like I was still angry, and said to Seal with a serious look, "You are not allowed to lie to me in the future. You are not allowed to skip class." Quote. Charles looked at Hermione, who had just coaxed him, and immediately replied, "I swear to the lamp, I will never lie to you again." This answer was obviously intended to tease Hermione, and after the two of them quarreled for a while, the train actually started. Hermione looked at Shire as if remembering something all at once, God, what about Harry and Ron? Didn't they miss the car? Seal also remembered something. Damn, I forgot about Dobby. Hermione looked at Seal with some doubts. She had never heard of the name Dobby, so she immediately got up and pulled Seal to start looking for Harry and Ron, but was stopped by Seal. Don't go. If there is no accident, they probably didn't get in the car. I think we need to find a teacher Olroot or Professor McGonagall to explain the situation. Wait, Seal, are they going to school? Hermione followed behind Seal worried. Trust me, they will come to school. There are many ways. I hope they don't choose the stupidest way. Seal shook his head helplessly, and led Hermione out of the carriage, saying as he walked. In the end, they found a lot of people, and all of the owls were basically released. After all, few owls stayed in the cage for reasons. Helpless, Seal and Hermione returned to the box, but found a girl sitting in the box. Hello, my name is Luna, Luna Lovegood. The little girl introduced herself to the two. I'm this year's freshman. To be honest, after hearing Luna's introduction, Seal was stunned for a moment. Why? Because Luna's voice is really the same as the original description, ethereal and mysterious. Envious. Your voice will definitely sing well. Hello, I'm Charles Lancaster, this is Hermione Granger, 2nd grade. After speaking, Charles introduced himself and Hermione. Hermione didn't care at all. Her energy was on the two friends who didn't get in the car. Luna clearly saw that the two were in a hurry, and after she said thank you, she continued to look at the naysayers in her hands. Seal looked at the anxious Hermione, and reluctantly walked to the window to open the window, and shouted, Fox. I need to find a teacher in a hurry. As soon as the voice fell, an unusually loud screeching sound appeared on the roof of the car, and then Fox flew in through the open window dragging his long tail feathers. Chapter 72-Flying Blue Coop. Fox turned and flew into the carriage with a gorgeous roll. After chirping happily, he put away his wings and looked at Seal. The bird's face was full of "What did you call me, Mr. Ben?" Seal is also incompetent. A bird can make expressions, and the key can be understood. Do you think it's amazing? He had no choice but to say to Fox, wait a minute, I also have a letter for you to send to Dumbledore, it's a bit of an emergency. Before Seal finished speaking, Hermione next to him had already taken out a pen and paper in Ciel's box and started writing. Seal didn't say anything after seeing Hermione's operation, and started teasing Fox. Fox, it is also very cooperative to play with Seal for a while. He's so beautiful, isn't he? An ethereal voice sounded. It was Luna. She covered half of her face with a magazine, revealing a pair of smart eyes looking at Fox, who was playing with Seal. Yes, his name is Fox. He is my teacher, Dumbledore's partner, a phoenix, very powerful. Seal replied to Luna's words with a smile, and Fox also tweeted proudly, expressing that he liked Seal very much. Compliment. Luna wanted to say something, but Hermione interrupted the conversation between the two. She handed the letter to Seal, and Seal took the letter and glanced at it briefly. Seeing Hermione's anxious look, Luna lowered her head and did not continue to speak. Seal took the pen in Hermione's hand, and simply added a few words and gave it to Fox. Excuse me, Fox, you must to the teacher. Fox picked up the letter and tweeted, and then disappeared as a flame. This scene frightened Luna, who was reading a book on the surface, but was actually watching the two of them secretly. He ignited spontaneously, Luna asked in a low voice, a little frightened. Before Seal could speak, Hermione answered his question impatiently. That's Fox's magic to move over long distances. Then looked at Seal. I'm still a little worried about Harry and Ron. Are they going to be okay? Hermione's brows knit together tightly. It's all right, it's just a little prank. If they were smart, they should have contacted the teacher. Charles replied with a smile. Dobby can say that Harry has no ill intentions at all. This is also a delay Harry's fame. Dobby still admires Harry very much. Hermione obviously knew Shire well, and immediately sees the loophole in Hungry Shire's words. What if they weren't so smart? Seal looked at Hermione in surprise when he heard Hermione's rhetorical question. Okay, the little girl actually began to act cautiously, and knew that she had found a loophole in her words. So Charles spread his hands. If you weren't so smart, you might see them later. Hearing CL's words, Hermione's sense of unease became even stronger. Seeing the old god Seal sitting by the window, he began to read Dumbledore's notebook. But she was so anxious that it was impossible for her to read as calmly as Seal. Just as she was about to ask what Seal meant, the train came out of a thick fog. Hermione vaguely seemed to hear Ron's cheers. So she tugged at Shire's clothes. I think I heard Ron cheering. Is that an illusion? Before Seal could answer, Luna on the opposite side replied to Hermione, you heard it right, I also heard cheers, a bit like the sound of harassing horseflies. Hermione frowned slightly. She didn't like the girl opposite very much. Hermione felt that she was a little crazy. But Charles couldn't help but laugh. It's a bit disturbing. After saying that, Seal leaned back, let the window out, pointed out the window, and motioned for Hermione to take a look. Hermione was a little puzzled, but she still passed Seal to the bedside and stretched her head out. Before Hermione could take a closer look at what Seal told her to look, a blue car rolled over Hermione's head. It was Ron, and a tumble just now threw Harry, who had fallen out of the car, back into the sedan. Looking at the two smiling boys in the car outside, Hermione felt that her lungs were about to explode. Ron! Harry! Hermione screamed. Ron obviously heard Hermione's scream, was startled by Hermione, and shrank his neck. Hermione's scream was like a basin of cold water, which suddenly extinguished the joy of the two of them on the adventure. Ron looked tremblingly at Harry, who was a little terrified in the co-pilot. What should we do? We seem to have made a big accident. Harry was also awake at this time. He patted his chest in shock, and answered helplessly, no way, we can't get into the platform. Let's fly quickly. I think Professor Dumbledore will help us. Someone is targeting me. Quote. Ron also knows that things have been done, and regretting it now is useless. It is better to hurry up to school, as Harry said, and maybe catch up with the sorting ceremony. So Ron put out his idea of being in the limelight, ignored the cheers of the twins in the carriage, and the applause of Gryffindor, stepped on the accelerator hard, and quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. Hermione shouted for a long time. Obviously, due to the distance and the dry wind, the two of them didn't hear what she was shouting at all. Seeing the two disappear from sight, Hermione retracted her head angrily and sat down on the seat. Seal patted Hermione's head lightly. It seems that they still chose not so smart. Seal looked at Hermione, who was sulking, with some amusing. Hermione felt that she had a terrible day, and the boys around her were also relieved by Seal. Although they were not so reliable, Hermione felt that Seal was so reliable compared to the two guys just now. Hearing Seal's words, Hermione started to frantically complain to Seal like he was firing a machine gun. Fortunately, Harry and Ron were not in the carriage, otherwise the Iron Triangle would definitely fight and stage an all-out martial arts. Luna still looked at the two people on the opposite side, especially the angry Hermione. At this time, Luna felt that Hermione must be entangled by many harassing flies. Hermione Bababa said a lot, and Seal took a bottle of happy water from the box and handed it to Hermione, comforting, It's okay, at most two people will be scolded. Dumbledore will not let Harry and Luo, the only unlucky one to drop out, as Mr. Weasley, who may have to undergo a period of scrutiny. Hermione felt better when she heard Ciel's words, but she was still annoyed by the two's psychedelic manipulations. Seeing Hermione's puffed-up look, Ciel couldn't help but slapped Hermione's bun on her face and comforted him. It won't be a big deal. Didn't we send a letter to the teacher explaining the situation? Hermione was flushed by Ciel Rua's face, as if remembering something, and looked at Ciel. By the way, what did you add to the letter? Ciel thought about it for a while, and was a little amused, and then said to Hermione with a smirk, It's nothing, it's just to tell the teacher not to feel too bad about the beating Willow in the school. Huh. Luna and Hermione both had black question mark faces. Chapter 73_Bland Dinner Party. The Hogwarts Express was still at its original speed. After an afternoon of wandering, it finally stopped at Hogsmeade Station. To be honest, from a purely experience point of view, Shire still felt that Hogwarts was a little bit more than that. The steam train still feels very good. Hermione hurriedly dragged Seal to find Hagrid, eager to know what was going on with the two troublesome boys, and hoped that nothing would happen to the two of them. Shire didn't take it seriously. Under his early warning, Loudang was guarding by the side, and he could make things happen to the two of them. That would be a real hell. Going through the bustling first-year people, Hermione suddenly found Hagrid like a giant among a group of first-year Ps. "Hi Hagrid, do you know how Harry and Ron are?" Hagrid also looked at Hermione in confusion. "No, I don't know, shouldn't they be with you?" Hermione wanted to say something, but was stopped by Seal. "It's okay Hagrid, Hermione is just too worried about Harry and Ron." "Right, what about teacher?" "Oh, you're talking about Professor Dumbledore. He's preparing dinner in the hall. Speaking of which, I'm not so looking forward to tonight's dinner. Even so, I don't think you'll want to miss the sorting ceremony." Hagrid he doesn't seem interested. Seal thanked and dragged Hermione to the second grade place. The second graders were going to school by carriage, and only the first grade had to cross the lake. "Let's go, Hermione, trust me, although they're not very smart, they'll be fine." Seal comforted Hermione, who frowned as he walked. The two found a carriage with an empty seat and were going to the school for the opening dinner. Hermione was not very interested. Until the end of the sorting ceremony, Harry and Ron did not appear at the Gryffindor table. Dumbledore did not leave the table throughout the whole process, but Professor McGonagall was at the end of the sorting ceremony. After that, he hurried out, and Professor Snape didn't show up the whole time. Charles briefly analyzed a wave, and then felt that Harry and Ron would definitely be sprayed to pieces by the old poisonous snake before they were released. According to Snape's character, Harry would never let him do such a reckless thing. Feel good. Sure enough, not long after the dinner started, Harry and Ron drooped their heads and were led into the hall by Professor McGonagall from the side foyer as if they were walking dead. The two sat opposite Shire and Hermione. Ron was about to cry. "I think we almost got fired." Ron whispered to Shire and Hermione, "Professor Snape sprayed us with venom for half an hour." Harry also had a lifeless expression as he ate the meal on the plate in a daze, without saying a word. Hermione was so angry that she wanted to teach the two of them a lesson, but she was held back by Seal, and shook her head slightly at Hermione, indicating that she would talk about it later, this time let the two of them talk. In order to ease the atmosphere, Seal looked at Harry and said lightly, "Is it all right?" Hearing Seal's words, the two instantly looked at Seal with fearful eyes in their eyes. "Not good. Not good at all." Harry shook his head like a rattle. "Snape gave us a hand, but accidentally wiped a palm-sized branch of the willow, Tiana. That was the beginning of a nightmare, and I thought we were almost dead." Harry still had lingering fears. Ron took a sip of the pumpkin juice in the quilt and then complained, "Fortunately, whereas Snape, he used magic to pull Harry and me out, but the car was planned to be scrapped, it being thrown into the Forbidden Forest by the beating willow. I think my mother will kill me." Ron seemed to finally realize how much trouble he had caused, and his body was almost catching up with the chaff sifter. "Hey, calm down, at most you'll be beaten up, and you'll pass." Charles comforted Ron with a heartless face, and the smirk on his face couldn't stop. "At least the two of you have made a big splash this time, haven't you?" "God, don't talk about it. *2, this time." The answers of the two were surprisingly consistent, especially Ron, who felt that his whole person was gray at this time. "Ha ha 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 ha." Shaw laughs in the laughter, and even a smile of a glimpse of Hermisiden's mouth. Charlie smiled enough to look at Harry. "Hey, Harry, remember that I started with school. What did you say?" Harry looked at Seal with wide eyes as if he remembered something. "Seal, you." Seal waved his hand directly, interrupting Harry. "You know, I never lie." Seal said mysteriously. "Come on, you said you're afraid of heights." Hermione rolled her eyes and complained to Seal precisely, making Seal very embarrassed, so she could only ask everyone to eat more vegetables. In fact, Hermione also found something wrong. Seal was always a prophet in some matters. From the time he received the admission notice last year to now, Seal knew many things, but Seal never took the initiative to participate, only he was in danger. Charles will take the initiative to participate. She still remembered the little book that Seal made last year. Last time, she secretly read it while Seal was away, but she couldn't understand a single word of the square characters on it. Sooner or later, we will find out what secret Seal is hiding. Hermione clenched her small fist and swore in her heart. A few people began to eat dinner in a turbulent manner. During this period, Seal also took time to look at Dumbledore on the rostrum. I saw him raise his glass and salute him. Seal waved his hand very casually. After all, he saved himself. Beat the willow. Dumbledore didn't care about Charles, and continued to eat the meal on the plate with a smile. The guests and hosts enjoyed the meal, and Charles felt that the elves were better at their craftsmanship. Dumbledore knocked on the cup and then delivered a speech similar to last year. Except for the very instructive room address last year, Dumbledore's speech is generally like this every year. Thinking of that damn room, Charles rolled his eyes angrily. After Loudeng finished speaking, the students began to go back to the dormitory, and Seal also followed in the team. Watching the new classmates excitedly listening to the prefect's introduction, Seal thought it was a little funny. Last year's it is the same with myself. Although then basically go downstairs and never take the stairs. Ron and Harry caught up with Seal from behind. Harry looked at Seal awkwardly, making Seal's scalp numb, watching the two directly showdown. Tell me, what are you two selling in the gourd? What medicine? The two looked at each other. Harry looked at Seal a little embarrassedly. It's nothing major, I just want to know, the two of us should be fine, right? You know, I mean when I was in school. Harry, I have tried to be as euphemistic as possible, and I hope that Seal will leave some morals and the like. After listening to Harry's words, Hermione rolled her eyes and quickly went after her roommate. Seal looked at Hermione, who disappeared into the crowd, and said angrily to the two of them, wait for being scolded, thinking about being okay. This is definitely not over. After he finished speaking, he disappeared into the crowd. Hearing Seal's words, Ron almost burst into tears, took out his wand and looked at Harry pitifully. I think I'm done, I don't dare to be here if it's over. Contacted the family. Quote. Harry patted Ron's shoulder comfortingly. How about we're going to ask Charles if he can fix it? Ron looked at his poor wand with only one hair left, and nodded helplessly. Chapter 74_Roar Letter. Fortunately, the first class of the new semester is Professor Sprout's class, which is good news for Ron. At least he has time to briefly repair his damaged wand. Seal and Hermione walked into the greenhouse together. This class was with Slytherin. Malfoy seemed to have received some warnings from his father, and smiled at Seal in a friendly way. In addition to being surprised, Seal returned a friendly salute. Seal still understood the rules of reaching out and not hitting a smiling face. Even so, it still made Harry, Ron and Hermione drop their jaws. The trio sneaked together to discuss what Malfoy had planned against Seal, but Seal ignored the trio's rambunctious discussions. If it was good, it should be the purebloods who wanted to take advantage of Voldemort. There is no news to win over himself, the heir of Dumbledore, in advance. In fact, he didn't take Malfoy's favor on Seal at all. Old Deng and Grindelwald didn't know what they were planning. Everything in the future would never be as described in the book. Have confidence. Shah-Ur, who was in a good mood, walked into the greenhouse with his head held high. No matter what we say, we are also people with status, and we still need to support us when it is time to support us. Of course, life is not always exactly what you think, and the smell of dragon dung and some strange smells in the greenhouse immediately restored Shire to the essence of salted fish. He walked quickly to a place with a lesser smell. Seal took a long time to get used to it before slowly recovering. At this time, Hermione led the two boys towards Seal. Seal, you have to be careful, Malfoy won't show affection for no reason. Hermione instructed Seal with some worry. Before Seal could answer, Ron, who was behind him, answered, that's right, Seal, Be careful, all Malfoys are full of bad water. Seal nodded helplessly, indicating that they were ready to tidy up for class. They quickly put on dragon leather gloves and waited for the arrival of Professor Sprout. After a while, the professor came to the greenhouse. The fat witch was still a kind lady, but she looked a lot haggard. Welcome back to Hogwarts. Today we are going to learn about mandrake grass. During the summer vacation, I planted a lot in batches. In front of you are the seedlings of mandrake grass. Their cry the sound isn't fatal, it's just a coma for hours. After speaking, Professor Sprout looked around the surrounding students very seriously, and then asked everyone to wear earmuffs after seriously instructing everyone to wear earmuffs, ready to demonstrate the process of soil replacement. Seeing the wrinkled rhizome that looked like a child, Seal couldn't help but sigh that the magic was amazing. This thing is really similar to the ginseng and Hishowu that can run in the myth of the Celestial Dynasty. I don't know if it can be used to make wine. The turbulent class was over, and Seal's roommate Neville was still stunned by surprise. He didn't wake up until the get-out of class was over. Seal helped Neville and followed the trio to the lobby for dinner. Neville was pale until he sat down, but Seal didn't say anything, and took Hermione to feast on it. Poor Ron found a bundle of tape somewhere and wrapped his broken wand over and over again, as if the thicker the wrap, the better the effect. Seal took the time to watch one of Ron's operations, and couldn't help laughing. Ron, is the wizard's physical repair okay? Hearing Seal's words, the people around Ron laughed. Even Ron himself thought it was a little funny, but he didn't know whether to laugh or not, and his expression was very strange. Finally, he sighed helplessly and said to Harry, "Look, I'll say I'm finished." Harry also patted Ron on the shoulder and replied with a smile, "You are indeed finished." As soon as Harry finished speaking, a flash came on, and a first-year freshman held up a camera and sent Harry a photo. "Hey Harry, I'm Colin, I adore you, can you ask your friend to take a picture of us?" Now it was Ron's turn, and he patted Harry on the shoulder. "I think you're done too." Harry nodded embarrassedly after hearing Ron's words. Only Seal and Hermione watched the play, and thought it was a little fun for the pair to be comfortable. Seal leaned closer to Hermione and said, "Look, I'll say it's good to be low-key sometimes." Hermione rolled her eyes directly, complaining wildly in her heart, and she didn't know who was kicked out of blowing up her back garden when she was in elementary school, and then was taken by her mother to squat. Seal didn't think about it that much. Now, Seal is looking forward to Ron's roaring letter. Seal has never seen this thing before. If you have time to study it, it would be absolutely interesting to send one to Grindelwald. Just as Seal was thinking, an owl flew over the auditorium, dropped a red letter directly, and was still in front of Ron. In an instant, Ron's face changed. Taking the letter with trembling hands, Ron felt that his life might be over soon. The blaster glanced at the letter in Ron's hand and looked very excited. "Look, Ron has received a roaring letter." Gryffindor, who is not too serious to watch the fun, boiled in an instant. Some told Ron to open it up, and some told Ron to run. Of course, the one who laughed the loudest was Slytherin headed by Malfoy. Them. Charles was also very interested and looked at Ron's expression on the execution ground and opened the letter. In an instant, the letter turned into a big mouth, and Mrs. Weasley's angry voice came from it. "Ron Weasley, they stole the car, and I wouldn't be surprised if they fired you. See what I do with you. You probably didn't even think about it, me and your dad. How did you feel when you found out that the car was gone? Dumbledore's letter was received last night, and your father almost died of shame. We worked so hard to pull you up, and I didn't expect you to do such a thing. You and Harry almost lost their lives. It's so irritating. Your dad will be censored in the unit. It's all your fault. If you don't follow the rules again, we will bring you back immediately." After shouting, Ron didn't forget to comfort Harry with the loud voice that could scare people to death, which made the two brothers blushed, and Ron couldn't wait to get into the cracks in the ground. Then the letter turned into a flame and disappeared in midair. Charles hugged his stomach and kept laughing. "Don't be sad, Ron, at least you're still at school. Trust me, if you're at home, you can experience my summer vacation. Happy. Seal couldn't stop laughing. Ron looked at the group of friends around him with a blushing face, and sighed helplessly. Just like what Seal said, if you were beaten by mistake, you have to stand at attention. This matter was originally impulsive. In the end, it was Hermione who held back a smile and went up to comfort Ron. It's all right, Charles said that Mr. Weasley will be fine. Trust Charles. Hearing this, Ron's heart was a little better, and he looked at Hermione gratefully, but then Seal added, yes, I never lie. Ron, Hermione and Halidu rolled his eyes. Before the crowd could end the excitement, a silver-white phoenix flew into the hall and landed directly in front of Seal. Then Dumbledore's voice came from the phoenix, Charles, if you have time, I hope you can come to the headmaster's office. Chapter 75_Horcrux in the principal's room. Dumbledore's Patronus turned into a cloud of white mist and dissipated after saying this. After Seal hurriedly ate 2 bites of food, he told Hermione that he didn't have to wait for him. Then I hurried to the principal's room on the 8th floor. In the afternoon, it was Lockhart's class. If I remember correctly, Lockhart's first class was a big problem. Carnivorous, Seal didn't want Hermione to suffer any inexplicable damage. What? You mean Harry and Ron? Those 2 big men, they are hurt when they get hurt, and scars are the romance of men. So please be yourself. After walking quickly to the head of the gate guard at the door of the principal's office, Shahar remembered that his teacher just called him over, but he didn't give him the password. Isn't this a scammer? Seal kicked the wall a little angrily. At this time, the stone beast glanced at Seal and moved away silently. For a moment, there was an emotion called embarrassment. Spread out. So, it doesn't matter if I have a password or not? Seal asked a little embarrassedly. Unfortunately, the stone beast didn't pay any attention to Seal. This is an ordinary stone sculpture in a Muggle world. The embarrassment doubled. Seal shrugged helplessly, and walked quickly into Dumbledore's headmaster's room. Seal didn't want to stay in this embarrassing place for a second. As soon as the door was opened, Dumbledore's voice rang out, Charles, I thought you came to me at school. Seal heard Dumbledore's words. He replied directly, it's nothing, I'm here to find you. Then he climbed onto the chair opposite his teacher very familiarly. As soon as he sat down, he saw the silver crown next to Dumbledore's desk, and Seal became nervous. Answer some of my questions, teacher. Dumbledore's eyes were full of loopholes in Seal's little actions, but he still looked at Seal with satisfaction. Please ask, classmate Seal. First, who made my wand? Second, where did I go during the summer vacation? Third, what was my mother's name, and what did she do to you when we first met? Holding his wand deadly, as long as Dumbledore answered incorrectly, Seal swore that it would be a blast of flame magic. Dumbledore was still very happy. He clapped his body and looked at Seal happily. Great vigilant Seal, it seems that Grindelwald has given you a lot. Let me think about these questions. I'm getting old, some things are not remembered so well. Quote. Oh yes, your wand was with your parents when they adopted you. Ollivander did it. I think I answered the second question just now. As for the third question. Speaking of which, Dumbledore seemed to remember something funny, and he couldn't help laughing out loud. Yes, your mother, Lisa, pointed a gun at me for the first time and claimed to arrest me for this old liar. The moment Dumbledore finished speaking, Seal relaxed and watched Dumbledore complain helplessly. Teacher, this joke is not funny. Dumbledore restrained his smile and looked at Seal. It seems that you know what this is. Seal, you should be more cautious. I have to say that your method of transferring the Horcrux is reckless. When Seal heard Dumbledore's words, his face turned a little red, and he was indeed arrogant in the first grade, which now seems to be absolutely black history. But Dumbledore's caring words still made Seal feel very warm, and in the caring eyes of the old man, he nodded seriously. This is not an alarmist char. The undead are 2 branches parallel to the elements, and Voldemort can be said to be the only necromancer in the contemporary era. You can't be too cautious. Dumbledore taught Charles earnestly, and Charles also had an attitude of humbly learning. In his previous life, Charles knew how precious the care from his elders was, so he listened very carefully. Looking at Seal's appearance, Dumbledore was also very happy to touch his beard. A smart and obedient student is the teacher's favorite no matter where he is. Seeing that Dumbledore seemed to have finished his lesson, Seal pointed to the crown on the table. "Teacher, are you finished?" Charles was actually very curious about the effect of the crown. It must be borrowed to play with it. "Unfortunately, no, I simply added a seal to this Horcrux to make it difficult for him to affect the people around him," Dumbledore replied to Seal with a smile. Seal was a little disappointed when he heard this, and thought he could add an orange outfit to himself, but it turned out to be in a sealed state. But thinking that the Horcrux is related to Voldemort, he dismissed the idea immediately. You must know that in the movie, as Harry destroys more Horcruxes, Voldemort acts more and more crazy, and it is scary to think about what 1 in 7 souls can do. It seems that you are similar to what I think. Dumbledore looked at Charles with some relief, and then became very serious. "Charles, you know, I felt the same magic as the crown at the opening ceremony." Breath. Seal was also surprised. Yes, Voldemort did have a Horcrux at the school, and it was in Ginny's hands. After thinking for a while and learning about the big snake in the secret room, Seal made a decision. "Yes, teacher, you didn't feel wrong. There is indeed a Horcrux in the school. It's like this." Seal told Dumbledore everything about the bookstore and what Malfoy had given Ginny the Horcrux, and even explained to Dumbledore what was going to happen this semester. Dumbledore wanted to interrupt Seal's spoiler at first, but as Seal talked more, Dumbledore also discovered some problems in the 2nd grade. Dumbledore interrupted Sirius when he was released early. "Charles, I understand. Next year's affairs will be arranged next year. It seems that you have a lot of tasks this year. It involves the inheritance of Slytherin, the life and death of that basilisk, and even Hagrid's innocence. It's complicated, and I need your help." Dumbledore interrupted Seal, rubbing his brows and looking at Seal. "As for the pure-blooded faction on Malfoy's side that you are in contact with, let it go first. It's too early for you to contact them now." Dumbledore rubbed his brows and said to Seal. Seal spread his hands and said that he never wanted to touch pure blood. As for helping the teacher, he had to do it, but he remembered it clearly. The last victim was Hermione. Chapter 76-Tragic Lockhart. When Seal came out of Dumbledore's office, his face was full of smiles. He and Dumbledore discussed a lot of plans. After learning the specific information, Dumbledore even listed a series of plans to train Harry. All he had to do was protect Hermione. Of course, what made Seal the happiest was that Dumbledore began to teach Seal. The two agreed to learn wizard magic in the Room of Requirement, to help Seal quickly master the basics, and listen to Loudeng's notice when the time came. Of course, there are also some unhappy places. Seal estimates that the so-called basic special training is still beaten. After all, no learning method is as fast as he has personally experienced. As for the issue of the Elder Wand, Seal feels that he should not think too much. According to Dengbradu's ability, unless he wants to, even a sneak attack can't beat him. Regarding the matter of the secret room, Seal vaguely guessed that it must be some way of Voldemort's control of the basilisk, otherwise it would not be possible to explain the death of 50 years ago, but at most this semester is about petrification. Seal felt that Dumbledore was also vaguely guessing, and even Seal felt that he was holding Voldemort's Horcrux in his hand, plus the notebook breath he felt at the beginning of this semester. Dumbledore had begun to doubt whether Harry was also a Horcrux. But these all need to be verified by Dumbledore himself. Seal didn't say it, and Dumbledore didn't ask. Some things can't be said too clearly, otherwise, wouldn't life be boring? He raised his hand and glanced at his watch. Well, the class has already started. Charles calmly began to go downstairs to go to Lockhart's class to have a look. Now Lockhart should have finished that stupid fan test. If nothing else, today might be the last defense against the dark arts class that Seal attends this semester. Seal feels that it is better to go to the library and read books if he has nothing to waste time watching dramas in class. By the way, about Lockhart, Seal also asked Dumbledore specifically about this question. This old man is also very black-bellied. The reason is very simple. Dumbledore saw Lockhart's book when he was bored. Coincidentally, Dumbledore happened to know the experience of several of them, but the protagonist was not the Peacock Man. Dumbledore did some research and found out what Lockhart was doing. It just so happened that because of the decline in sales of his book, Lockhart had a bad idea, wondering if adding his book to the teaching material would be able to improve it. A lot of sales, so I applied for the teacher position of Defense Against the Dark Arts. Dumbledore looked at it. My dear, you sent it up before I found you. It's still an annual job. It's okay. It doesn't take much effort to get it. After all, this position wants to go out of the door intact. At present, it can be counted on one hand. So, Lang Yuching, concubine interested, the two sides hit it off, and Lockhart took office. Of course, the main reason is that Lockhart applied alone this year, which Dumbledore was also very desperate. Thinking of Dumbledore's complaints to himself in the office, the corners of Ciel's mouth began to rise uncontrollably. Unexpectedly, the headmaster of Hogwarts would not be able to sleep because of the lack of teachers. What I didn't expect was that even the principal began to doubt whether the teaching position of Defense Against the Dark Arts was cursed, especially after finding Voldemort's Horcrux at the prompt of Charles. Our principal is very good. Checked out the school and there was no damnation at all. In the end, Dumbledore was not sure what made this teacher become an annual caster, and finally hoped that Charles knew something. Of course, the result was that, under the comfort of Ciel, Dumbledore accepted the fact that this lesson was a metaphysics. It was neither magic nor science, it could only be metaphysics. Ciel hummed a song with his hands behind his back, and walked happily to the door of the classroom. Thinking of Dumbledore's helplessness in his head, he happily pushed the door open, and suddenly his mood was not so good. I saw that Lockhart on the stage was opening the screen to his heart's content, constantly praising Hermione's perfect fan test paper. Hermione also covered her face and lowered her head helplessly, not wanting to pay any attention to Lockhart at all. Hermione swears that getting a full score on this test is purely due to her own endorsement instinct and her desire to get a full score in the exam. Under the influence of Ciel, Hermione is now completely disfavored by this Peacock Man, not to mention anything else. The way Lockhart almost peed his pants at the bookstore had already made Hermione come off the powder. Hearing the sound of Ciel pushing the door, Hermione was so excited that she was about to cry. Finally, it was no longer a socially embarrassing time for my mother, this damn instinct. Of course, Lockhart didn't get much better. Seeing the dark-faced Ciel, it was like a peacock who was showing his feathers on the screen. He stayed where he was, until Ciel sat down beside Hermione with a dark face, then coughed awkwardly and prepared to continue his performance plan. Shire and Hermione really didn't want to talk to Lockhart on the stage at this time. The two completely ignored Lockhart and started whispering in their seats. Lockhart saw it, but didn't dare to care. Now the kids are horrible. I heard you say you got a perfect score in the exam. You are indeed Miss Know-It-All. Ciel leaned closer to Hermione and teased in a low voice. Fuck off, don't make fun of me with this, my goddamn instinct. Hermione scolded with a red face. After hearing Hermione's complaints, Ciel covered his mouth and tried very hard, otherwise he would laugh too loudly. Just as the two were about to continue talking, a scream interrupted Ciel and Hermione. Ciel looked up and said, well, Lockhart really released a group of Cornish elves just like in the movie. Ciel and Hermione calmly looked at the chaotic classroom. At this time, Lockhart had been robbed of his wand and hid under the table, while Harry and Ron were using books to slap the approaching elf. If it wasn't for the first time Ciel gathered fire elements to form a simple element field around the two, so that these little blue-skinned monsters dared not approach, the two should have followed in the footsteps of Harry Ron. Looking at Neville hanging in the air, and then looking at Lockhart hiding under the table, Hermione was really disillusioned at the last moment. The elves came and fixed all of them. The effect was obvious. They were all pinned in midair and unable to move. He stood up and patted Ciel on the shoulder. Let's go to the library. Hermione also said helplessly. Last year, Voldemort had a good time, how about staying here and playing? Speak, Lockhart rushed out from under the table, good job. Miss Granger, 20 points for Gryffindor. Seal covered his face helplessly, how could there be such a shameless person? Seal was also shocked, and pulled up Ron, who was still on the ground in a daze. The four ignored Lockhart and prepared to leave. Seal, who walked to the door, seemed to remember something. He took out his wand and waved it, and a fire snake that was as red as blood appeared and circled over the classroom. After a while, the elf that had been pinned just now was burnt without any remaining ashes. Next, of course, in addition to the elf, there is Lockhart's wand. Who let two little elves play with Lockhart's wand? No wonder Seal, who turned his head and looked at Lockhart, who was holding the table with his legs trembling, with a standard villain face. Dear Mr. Lockhart, I think, Hermione and I are going to take a semester off. You won't disagree, will you? Under the light of the flames above his head, the villain face that Seal deliberately put on was even more Voldemort than Voldemort, and Lockhart had no doubt that as long as he refused, the fire snake on his head would definitely come down and swallow him. With difficulty squeezed out a smile, he nodded tremblingly. Then the fire snake disappeared, and Lockhart watched as Charles, who had recovered into a sunshine boy, disappeared at the door of the classroom. For the first time in his life, Lockhart began to doubt his decision, and now the children are really scary. Chapter 77-Prelude to Conflict. Lockhart's class finally caused an uproar in the whole school, and it was the first time that the teachers and students who were so sloppy had seen it. Of course, in contrast to this, the performances of Shire and Hermione were publicized all over the world by the big mouth Ron. Char's flame magic is really cool, and the scene full of special effects also opened the eyes of the slow little wizard that day. Of course, all of this has nothing to do with the foursome. Thanks to Ciel's blessing, the group of four got rid of Lockhart's class. Only Hermione seemed to still go to a class, and after returning, they started to complain about the three boys frantically and they watched a class again. Surprisingly, in addition to Ciel, there are many people who occasionally come to Lockhart's class. Professor McGonagall, who is known for being strict, didn't say anything, just let it go, even if Lockhart was in his class. In front of her crying and complaining that the students were disobedient, she also turned around and left with a symbolic deduction of 1 point. The four people who heard the news simply widened their eyes and said they couldn't believe it. Harry was even killed by paranoia and wanted to investigate whether Professor McGonagall was under control. Of course, this mentally retarded idea was rejected by Ciel from the very beginning, and he once again emphasized that Harry needs to think, instead of being reckless without knowing anything. Now Dumbledore takes care of it, what about the future? It's impossible to count on Charles, right? Because of Lockhart's reasons, Ciel and Hermione set up a study group, and Ciel was in charge of the textbook course, and Hermione and Ciel taught together. Of course, after doing this, it was painful for Ciel and joy for Dumbledore. Even though most of Ciel's textbooks and courses were taken from Dumbledore, Dumbledore always gave Ciel to him cheerfully after teasing him on purpose. What kind of sloppy Lockhart is? Dumbledore's current state is real, so Dumbledore even has a hint of support for Ciel's approach. Of course, what made Dumbledore the most happiest was Ciel's fancy rolling. This behavior was true, and Dumbledore, who had been lonely for a lifetime, experienced the feeling of being a grandfather. In the end, a peculiar sight even appeared at Hogwarts. The classrooms of Shire and Hermione were full, even if this was not Shire's original intention. What's more, he even ordered a photo stone to record the video of the class and circulated it privately. After Ciel knew about this, Hanako rubbed his teeth to know that the high-end alchemy equipment such as the Shadow Stone has always been sold at a high price on the Diagonal. With this money for Ciel, Ciel swears what you want to learn, as long as Ciel can teach it clearly. The most terrifying thing is that Shire has inexplicably more girls fans, and some of Shire's class are instantly made into some pictures similar to expression packs to communicate in some groups of girls. Hermione was angry for a long time, but there was nothing she could do. Finally, After the discussion of the 4 people, it was decided to reduce the number of students in the class. Seal couldn't stand the screaming every time he went on stage. It didn't look like a class. It's like a star meeting. Of course, the only one who was unhappy about this was Lockhart. The Peacock Man stubbornly believed that Seal had stolen his limelight, but he did not dare to take revenge. Seal's fiery red flame, as the most famous person in Hogwarts' bright Ravenclaw graduate, he still knows. According to his level of only releasing the Oblivion spell, it would be pure abuse against Seal. Therefore, Lockhart recently decided to plan some big things to steal his limelight. After all, he is a teacher and a star. Of course, life will not be so dull or even boring. In the end, Seal still didn't escape the flying class. Hermione couldn't do it to the teacher to report Seal, but through Quidditch training, he got rid of Harry and gave Seal a special one. Even a flying lesson, Hermione could still do it. Of course, Seal resisted desperately, but Hermione had no choice but to find out what Seal had lied about and come to Yashar. Finally, a deal was reached, and Seal went to class, and Hermione would never talk about it again in the future. The only beneficiary of this small disturbance may be Harry, and even Ron licked his face and used himself to be born in a wizarding family. He took up a teaching assistant position on the grounds that he had been in touch with brooms since he was a child. After all, he wanted to give Charles classes really too difficult. Finally, on a sunny afternoon, with the Gryffindor team fully dressed, Ron and Hermione escorted a listless Shire to the Quidditch pitch. In view of Seal's usual excellent performance, Captain Wood didn't say anything, but told Harry to be careful not to let Seal fly too high. When he finished teaching Seal and came back to training, Seal pouted and said nothing. In fact, in Shire's heart, Shire is really not interested in Quidditch or something. The outcome depends on the seeker. The setting of 200 is too buggy, and there is absolutely no confrontation in sports, not to mention Shire. He's not really interested in ball games either. Compared to sports, Shire is more interested in fast-breaking chemical bonds, commonly known as explosions. So a magical picture appeared on the Quidditch training ground. The Gryffindor players above were neatly dressed, interspersed constantly over the field, practicing tactics. On the soft grass below, Harry rode a worn-out his broom, and he was guiding the constipated Seal to fly less than a meter above the ground, not much faster than a snail. Of course, if it hadn't, Seal would probably be very happy with Colin, who was taking pictures next to him, Ron, who was standing on the ground constantly interjecting and guiding, and Hermione, who was laughing like a ball with his stomach in his arms. First of all, Charles has to admit that this thing doesn't slap his ass. Of course, it is also possible that Harry's Nimbus 2000 has a special cushion spell or something, and Seal doesn't know. Another point is that Seal still feels great about Harry's Nimbus 2000, at least this broom is very obedient, even if it is as fast as Seal, it is still very obedient. Of course, such a beautiful picture will not last long, and there will definitely be disruptors. No, just as Shire landed, a group of Slytherin Quidditch players in green uniforms appeared on the pitch. Wood immediately discovered the existence of Slytherin, and immediately stopped the training. All Gryffindor players flew down and confronted Slytherin. "We came first, Flint, we're already training," Wood argued loudly, and Wood, who flew down, looked ugly as the Slytherin team endured a Nimbus 2001. "Don't look at us like that, why are we about to experiment with our new equipment, and besides, we have this Professor Snape's approval note." Slytherin's captain, a buck-toothed man, looked at Wood opposite with pride of showing off. "Get out of the way, look at you guys, Sweep series, Comet series, ha 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 ha, Wood, do you think you have a chance of winning?" Same. Even Malfoy in the team looked at the Gryffindor team opposite with contempt. Seal stood by and did not speak. Indeed, compared to the neat and unified Slytherin team, the Gryffindor at this time the team is more like a motley crew. Humph. At least we Gryffindors don't need to use money to buy places. Hermione's upright character broke out. Looking at the green clothes on the opposite side, Hermione was instinctively disgusted and directly scolded. Hearing Hermione's words, the entire Gryffindor team cheered for Hermione, laughing and looking at the Slytherin team opposite. The buck-toothed man's pride froze on his face. Looking at Hermione, he asked directly, "Mudblood. Say it again." Malfoy, who was still smug, turned pale in an instant. Before Malfoy could stop him, Ciel's cold and frosty voice rang beside him. "Idiot, you just say. What? Chapter 78 for the tribe. Let's fight." Hearing Ciel's angry words, this time, not only Malfoy's face turned pale, but even Hermione, Harry and Ron became extremely pale. In Diagon Alley and Lockhart's class, the three of them had really seen what it's like to get angry with Ciel, not to mention now that they are facing Gryffindor's sworn enemy Slytherin. If Ciel is really careless, let's use that blood-red flame on people. It is definitely a light drop out of school. Charles, calm down. Harry stepped forward and tried to hold Charles so that he wouldn't be so impulsive. But before Harry could hold Ciel, something that surprised everyone happened. I saw Charles sunk his waist and turned around, his strength from the ground, and a straight punch that was as powerful as a bamboo slammed into Big Bucktooth's face. "Idiot. I exercise every day so that you can talk to me in a calm manner." After this punch, everyone was quiet for a second, and then a roar resounded through the Quidditch training ground at Hogwarts. A group of Gryffindors seemed to have received a signal and began to rush towards Slytherin with a roar. Slytherin was not cowardly, shouting loudly and rushing towards the Gryffindors. Soon, the Quidditch training ground was turned into a field fighting training ground, and at first it was just the Gryffindor Quidditch training team and Shire and Harry and Ron against Slytherin. With the advantage of the number of people, Ciel really took the opportunity to beat the fragrant Buckteeth to the death, but then the staff of Slytherin Academy who came over began to put pressure on the Gryffindors. Of course, Gryffindor is not jealous. Under various summons, they rushed to join the battle from all directions. Usually, the two academies have been grumbling for a long time, and there are constant small frictions in private. The number of people was increasing, and even Hermione kicked the big bucktooth who scolded her several times in an unobtrusive corner. But as the number of people increased, Ciel clearly felt that things were not quite right. Ciel stopped spitting out the fragrance, stood up and threw down the big buck teeth that were no longer human-shaped, looked around, and pulled Hermione out of the battle. "Damn. If I remember correctly, this little fat man is Ravenclaw. Dude, why does this guy grab Slytherin so hard?" Ciel looked a little surprised at the chaos of the battle, and whispered a question to Hermione, who had witnessed the whole process. Hermione simply rolled her eyes. "You ask me, who am I to ask?" The implication is that he doesn't know the reason. Hermione even pointed to the extra wild girl on the side. "I know that person, Hufflepuff, isn't he beating up the twins too?" Ciel looked in the direction Hermione was pointing. "Good guy, this shaved head and a beard with a proper beard, Lord Kui, is also a girl." Shire said that his gender view has been impacted. You see, even the roaring posture is exactly the same as that of Lord Kui. "Lord Kui, have you also been reincarnated? Or is this your descendant who also awakened the god-slaughtering physique?" Ciel shook his head and looked at the twins who were pressed to the ground frantically. He felt that things were a bit big, and he quickly pulled Hermione and said to her, "Go find Professor McGonagall and Snape. Remember, look for both. Don't miss one." Hermione nodded and ran quickly towards the castle. Watching Hermione go away, look at the beaten-up twins who were suspicious of life, and Harry and Ron, who were mad and excited while suppressing Malfoy's frantic output. There are also students who don't know what college they are coming over. Ciel took out his wand, pulled out a grass on the ground, and performed the transfiguration. The grass swayed and began to expand. After a while, a one-handed sword appeared in Ciel's hand. Wooden, Ciel doesn't want to accidentally kill someone. "It's already like this, it can't be any worse," Ciel muttered in a low voice, raising his sword over his head and shouting loudly, "For Gryffindor. For the Alliance. For the headmaster, go with me." After shouting, he took the wooden sword and rushed into the battlefield, just like a temporary transfer to Gandalf, and the one-handed sword was proficient. The students who came behind heard Ciel's call, and suddenly felt their blood rush. We can't lose, we can't do errands, so they rushed in for Gryffindor, and the senior students even rushed in. Someone arrogantly changed himself into a suit of armor, just like a medieval knight. With Gryffindor taking the lead, the other three academies can't lose, the group can lose, but under the central idea of not losing face. For a while for Ravenclaw, for Slytherin, and for Hufflepuff the sound resounded through the training ground. Just as the number of people increased and the weapons gradually began to be upgraded from fists to armor and wooden swords, the 4 academy principals and Lockhart all came. Looking at the chaotic battlefield, cursing and laughter mixed together and rushed into Professor McGonagall's ears. Professor McGonagall felt that his blood pressure jumped so high, took out his wand and pointed to his throat, then a roar like a lion's roar resounded above the entire Hogwarts. Stop all of them! Hearing Professor McGonagall's roar, everyone stopped, and the one who was close was constantly rubbing their ears. Of course, Seal was the one who was close and pushed away the one who was lying on him and passed out. A strong man stood up from the ground and rubbed his ears indifferently. Because of the large number of people, Seal was also brutally beaten, and was knocked to the ground with an electric cannon. The most annoying thing was that Seal didn't know who it was, and the corpse of a strong man was spinning. Pressed on Charles. Never, never, the worst fight since the establishment of Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall's mouth began to tremble with anger, and his face flushed red as he pointed at everyone present. All colleges, 50 points. Professor McGonagall's eyes were already red. He glanced around at the people who were still standing and saw Seal who was rubbing his ears. At this time, Professor McGonagall remembered Dumbledore's words at the beginning of the first year, and felt his blood pressure jumped up again. Charles Lancaster. You better tell me that this is not caused by you. It's not my professor, I swear. Seal spread his hands innocently, saying that I have nothing to do with the rain. Just as Seal's voice fell, a Slytherin goalkeeper struggled to get up and pointed at Seal. You did it first. Quote. Shatter frowned and glanced at this big brother. Good guy, full body armor, no wonder he's still dizzy. Next time you must remove your armor first. Hearing Slytherin's accusation, several professors instantly looked dangerously at Seal, who was pretending to be innocent. No, it's not. Hermione's voice sounded from behind Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall, it's not like that. It was the people from the Slytherin team who provoked first, saying that I was a mudblood, and Seal was too angry. Hands on. Hearing Hermione's answer, the faces of several professors changed at once. This is not a good word. Professor McGonagall glanced at Snape with a gloomy face, and was interrupted by Snape just as he was about to speak. Slytherin is deducting 20 points. I think they should learn to respect their classmates. All the students involved in the fight will hand me a review book tomorrow. After that, he turned around and left. Professor Shagger thought for a while but didn't stop Snape from leaving. He sighed and looked at the people present. Everyone writes a review book and gives it to their dean. Seal, come with me and go for a while. My office, I have something to ask you. Shire just breathed a sigh of relief, ready to make a face to comfort Hermione, Harry and Ron who were looking at him worriedly. Professor McGonagall turned back again, and said to everyone who had just breathed a sigh of relief, all right. Yes, if you are seriously injured, go to the hospital as soon as possible. If you are injured lightly, restore this place to its original state. Quote. Without waiting for Seal to respond, Professor McGonagall grabbed Seal's Fate's neck and carried him away. Chapter 79_follow-up. Seal was taken to Professor McGonagall's office and was trained for more than half an hour. Seal also had a full understanding. Professor McGonagall's education method was comparable to that of a Tang monk, and he said that he deeply recognized his own mistakes, and he didn't. Should be hands-on. But I silently added a sentence in my heart. Next time I will dare. After all, being ridden on the head and shitting is definitely not Seal's style. Next time Seal can't guarantee that he is still sensible, whether it is a fist or a wand that is stretched out. Just when Professor McGonagall was about to punish Seal, Dumbledore pushed the door and walked in, looking at Seal who was humbly being taught on the surface, but inside I would dare to teach Seal for half an hour. his face flushed with anger. The parched Professor McGonagall. Dumbledore reluctantly made a little joke. It looks like my prediction from last semester has come true. Dumbledore didn't say anything. As soon as he finished speaking, Professor McGonagall gave Dumbledore a huge blank eye. The current situation is obviously not the time to say nasty words, right? The eyes of the two exchanged. The experience of many years of colleagues made Dumbledore instantly understand Professor McGonagall's thoughts. I have some things for Shire to do. Hearing this, Professor McGonagall's face turned pale, thinking that this is your student, precious apprentice, and punished. Maybe this hand is raised high, and then gently lowered. There is no difference between fines and confiscations. However, the two had been working together for many years, and Professor McGonagall knew what an old urchin Dumbledore's mission was, and sighed helplessly, okay, but, Charles, you still have to submit a review to me. Dumbledore, take him away. Charles was ecstatic when he heard this. Isn't this free from confinement? Old Deng too is very talkative. As for the review, that thing is just a template, just write a name, and Shire has prepared a lot of this thing since he was a child. The happy seal followed Dumbledore out of Professor McGonagall's office. Dumbledore looked at the happy seal and sighed helplessly. His apprentice was good everywhere, but when he didn't talk about business, he was absolutely rude. I want people to be beaten, but it is very strange that despite the skin, in front of the big right and wrong, but the three views are surprisingly positive. Your confinement will be this weekend, 2 days in a row. Get ready for seal, dress more formally, a friend of mine wants to meet you. Dumbledore said helplessly to the happy seal. Okay teacher, I'll be there on time, don't worry, teacher. Seal was still very happy. This was not a punishment. Dumbledore was still very protective of his shortcomings, and Seal knew this. Seeing where the silly seal was, Dumbledore suddenly felt annoyed, raised his hand and knocked on Seal's forehead, and said angrily, be honest next time, don't let me always go get you. Go to Hagrid, your friends are worried about you. Seal covered his head, smiled stupidly, then bowed to his teacher, and happily ran to Hagrid's hut. To be honest, if you put aside Professor McGonagall's half-hour spell, Seal is still very happy. Since he came to Hogwarts, Seal has never used the good skills he has cultivated since he was a child. On the way to being beaten, or preparing to be beaten. At one point, Seal was very depressed, not because he was not strong enough, but the enemy was a boss, whether it was Grindelwald or Voldemort. If nothing else happened, he would be beaten up in the face of his own teacher. Of course, there is still a difference. Voldemort really beats him to the death, the kind that kills him. Grindelwald also beats him to the death, but at least he gave Seal some relief, and he could let him rescue him. As for Dumbledore, Seal, I believe that my teacher will definitely start very lightly. After running and jumping all the way to Hagrid's hut, he knocked on the door opened and a panda head stuck out, which startled Seal. Take a closer look, isn't this Ron? Brother, did you fail to practice animagus? Seal clutched his stomach and laughed at the door of Hagrid's hut, almost unable to straighten his back. Ron looked at Seal, who was laughing wildly while covering his stomach, feeling helpless. Don't laugh at Seal, Harry is worse than me, can you get in? Come in, I'm sorry, I'm slow, you should take some medicine, Ron. Seal rubbed his aching stomach with one hand, and walked in while holding Hagrid's door with the other. As soon as he entered the door, Seal was hugged by Hermione, who flew towards him. Charles, my God, are you all right? Hermione looked at Seal up and down worriedly. Professor McGonagall gave it to you. What's the punishment? Seeing that Seal was fine, Hermione began to care about Seal's punishment again. It's okay, Hermione, I don't have any major issues. As for the punishment, it's just a review. You know, I have a secret weapon. It's easy, no problem. Seal rubbed Hermione's head happily. The answer, obviously, the little girl was worried. Seeing Hermione blushing quietly hiding behind her, Seal also looked at her with a smile on her face for a while. You have to admit, Hermione's looks are really cute. Putting away the LSP's smile, Seal looked around and found Harry, who was cleaning his glasses. Harry was obviously not in good condition. His nose was red and blood-stained, and the corners of his mouth were blue and purple. Hagrid was giving him on medicine. "Hi Seal, are you all right?" Harry greeted him warmly when he saw Seal coming in, looking like he was in a good mood. "Harry, did you just cry? Your nose is that red." Charles looked at Harry and made a joke, but obviously it didn't work well. Harry was hit on the nose and his eyes were shattered. Fortunately, Hermione repaired the glasses with magic. Ron closed the door and came out from the back, complaining to Shire. "But it doesn't matter, Malfoy is worse than us. Ron and I are avenged." Harry looked excited, not like he was beaten at all. After Hagrid drugged Harry, he signaled to Seal to find a place to sit. He sat on the huge sofa and said to the four of them, "Although I don't recommend you fight, I have to say, Seal, that punch was such a relief. The Slytherin gang is not a good guy." Seal pulled Hermione to a place to sit down. Hagrid comforted Hermione after a good meal. Hermione said it was okay, and the one who scolded her was taken away by Seal, and the annoying Malfoy was also taken away by Harry and Ron. Hermione said that she didn't care at all, and even a little happy. A few people talked for a long time, and Hagrid even invited Shire to show his skills and prepare the ingredients by himself. Shire thought about it for a while, and he readily agreed. Just as Hagrid went to prepare the ingredients, Seal seemed to remember something and turned to Harry and Ron. "By the way, when is your confinement?" Ron returned to Shire listlessly. "Tonight, go to the hospital with Filch to wipe the chamber pot, and don't use magic." After that, he took out the broken wand wrapped with tape, "And even if I want to use it, I can. Enough to choke and use." Quote. Harry glanced at the listless Ron and frantically complained, "Be content, I'm going to help that peacock man reply to the fans tonight. God, kill me." After speaking as if remembering something, the two turned their heads to look at Seal. "What about you? What kind of confinement are you fighting this time?" The corners of Seal's mouth rose wildly, and Versailles immediately stood up. "Oh, it's nothing. I just told Hermione, it's just a review. I have a template, you can sign it and submit it." Charlton paused, and looked at the increasingly dangerous eyes of the two people on the opposite side. "If you insist, there is also a confinement for 2 days. On weekends, you have to do some errands with the teacher. It's a very serious punishment." Quote. Seal complained without any desire to survive, completely ignoring the two expressions on the opposite side that seemed to be eating lemons. Harry and Ron looked at each other quickly, and the two, who were good brothers, reached a consensus in an instant. Looking at Charles's arrogant Versailles expression, Harry yelled and beat him. Then he and Ron pounced. Hermione looked at the three male creatures twisted into a ball on the ground and sighed while covering their heads with a headache. "Life is not easy," Hermione sighed. Chapter 80 _ the beginning of the drama. After dinner, Harry was still called by Lockhart to help reply to the letter. Ron was carried away by Filch, and followed Filch to clean the chamber pot with a face of dying. Seal and Hermione were both lying comfortably in front of the stove in the lounge. The autumn in England was abnormally humid, causing the temperature to plummet, especially at night, when Seal returned to his exclusive stove seat, like the one above. As in the semester, Seal was fascinated by holding a magic book. Hermione was also reading, but she was always restless. After a while, Hermione closed the book and looked at Seal. "I suddenly have a bad feeling, Seal. Are we going to see Harry and Ron?" Shire was taken aback when he heard Hermione's words. There was still a big basilisk wandering around in the school. According to the time, Ginny was about to attack, so Shire immediately stopped Hermione. "You just think too much." "Well, it seems that Harry and Ron's ability to cause trouble has left a deep shadow on you." Hermione had some bad premonitions, but when she heard Ciel's ridicule, she suddenly became annoyed. "Yes, they are always causing trouble, but it's all trivial. You generally don't cause trouble. An accident is definitely a big deal." Quote. Seeing Hermione's puffed-up look, Shire put down the book and started teasing Hermione. "Come on, what can I do? I'm doing justice, okay." Seeing Ciel's smug look, Hermione began to scold. "The troll, Voldemort, Quirrell, and Dumbledore's adventures on vacation, without a single letter, made me worry about a vacation. Quote. Looking at Hermione, who started to turn over old accounts, Seal had a black line. Good guy, no matter whether it is domestic or foreign, how did this girl's unique skills of turning over old accounts achieve global unity? Taking advantage of Hermione's breathing time, Seal hurriedly interrupted Hermione to continue casting spells. Otherwise, even the embarrassing things that her mother told Hermione when she was a child would be pointed out by Hermione. Okay, I admit defeat. You're terrible, you remember so clearly. Charles pretended to wipe the sweat from his forehead to hide his embarrassment. Of course, I'm still very confident in my memory. Hermione looked at Seal with a smug look on her face. By the way, Charles. Before Hermione could finish speaking, the door to the lounge was pushed open. Harry walked in staggeringly, greeted the two of them, and then walked over and sat down opposite them. On the sofa. My God, Lockhart is a disaster. I tell you, he is so narcissistic that he attaches an autographed photo to every reply. He even asked me to sign it. Harry sat on the sofa and looked tired. Now, the expression of destruction bar began to frantically complain to the two of them. Be content. Ron went to wipe the chamber pot, or wipe it with your hands. You just experienced some mental damage. Charles said, looking at Harry, who looked like I was a salted fish. By the way, Hermione. What did you just say? Nothing. Isn't Ron back yet? Hermione looked a little unnatural and then changed the subject abruptly. Harry answered Hermione's words immediately. Don't think about it. I took a detour to see it. Ron won't be back at least in the middle of the night. The chamber pots are piled up. Fortunately tomorrow is the weekend. Ron can sleep well. Feel. When Charles heard Harry's words, he immediately felt that Ron was really pitiful. It was a double destruction both physically and mentally. I hope poor Ron can come back, instead of being smoked and staying overnight in the school hospital. By the way, Seal, a strange thing happened when I came back. I heard a voice whispering in the corridor. I didn't understand what it was saying, but I couldn't find the source of the sound for a long time. Holly sat up at once and watched Seal and Hermione share their adventures, hoping that the reliable and somewhat reliable people would give some advice. Before Hermione released her opinion, Seal answered Harry first. Come on, I think you were hallucinated by Lockhart, right? Collins whispers. Ha 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 ha. Hermione didn't have any opinion at first. She just wanted to remind Harry not to investigate privately, but after hearing Seal's teasing, she also laughed happily along with Seal. Harry looked at the two people who were laughing at him, and replied a little dejectedly, well, maybe I was really devastated by Lockhart and had hallucinations. By the way, when I came back, I met Nick without a head. He invited me to his death party. Harry said excitedly. He had never thought of going to a ghost party, so he seemed very excited, and even Hermione was excited. Really, Harry? That must be great. Of course, we can go to Nick's death party together on Sunday night. I'll invite Ron when he returns. Harry was also excited to start planning the next trip. Seal knew what kind of banquet it was, but he didn't say anything. Some things had to be dealt with in order to grow up. Of course, Seal didn't want to go, even though he couldn't go if he wanted to. So Charles interrupted the excited two. I'm sorry, Harry, I may not be able to go. You know, I'm going out with Dumbledore on the weekend, and I don't know when I'll be back, so I'm very sorry. Sorry. Hearing Seal's words, both of them looked at Seal with pitiful eyes, as if to say that this poor child couldn't attend such an interesting party. Seal felt that their eyes were not very hurtful, but insulting. Extremely sexual. The end, Seal couldn't hold back, and kindly reminded him, I suggest you prepare more food in the dormitory. Really, trust me, oh Hermione doesn't have to, there should be ingredients in my box. When the two heard Seal's words, they were a little puzzled, but they didn't take it to heart. All their attention was on the upcoming death anniversary banquet. If it wasn't for the curfew, Hermione would have to go to the library to check the materials now. What to prepare? Looking at the two of them, Seal felt that his reminder didn't seem to be of that much use. He looked at the time and interrupted the discussion between the two. Okay, I think we should go back to bed first. It's very late. Just put some firewood on the stove and keep it burning until Ron comes back. After Seal's reminder, the excited two people calmed down, and climbed up on their bodies in a flash of exhaustion. Hermione endured the sleepiness and said to the two of them, Seal is right, my God. I'm really sleepy. I'm going back to bed, and you go to bed earlier, Shire, and you're going to drink Professor Dumbledore tomorrow. I see, you two go first. I'll go to sleep after I add some firewood. Charles turned to get the firewood, and turned his back to the two, breathing heavily. After Seal finished speaking, the two turned around and went back to the dormitory. After Seal finished adding firewood, he looked at the raging flames, then turned to look at the warm Gryffindor lounge and couldn't help sighing, I hope teacher the plan is correct. After saying that, Seal also hurried back to the dormitory to sleep. Hermione was right. You have to get up early tomorrow, so hurry up and go to bed. The life of the dog is important.